I talk about Smallville a lot, but when it comes to listening, one podcast is at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor to each and every episode. And while their series rewatch has concluded, the podcast continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk. Listen wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows on the Always Hold On To network. I'm a parent, which means that a family-friendly comic shop is a must, and there's none better than Aw Yeah Comics. Visit one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. Follow them on social media and at awyeahcomics.com for news about signings, live sales, and much more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah! My comic shop closed over a decade ago, but if there's one place where I feel that same sense of camaraderie, it's Fat Moose Comics, New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store, led by current owner Sean Hendricks. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany, New Jersey, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Supergirl fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to count down the top 10 episodes of the Supergirl TV series are the hosts of Supergirl Radio, Rebecca Johnson. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having us.
And Morgan Glennon, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting us on.
I've really been looking forward to this, and I'm excited to get into our lists and compare and see what we came up with, and to talk about the show generally. But first, I'll toss this to you, Rebecca, if you don't mind taking this. Apologies for a very basic question, but for the benefit of our audience, would you mind sharing a bit about the secret origin of Supergirl Radio, how it came to be, and how you and Morgan came to join forces?
Sure. It's a great story, I think. So in 2015, we have a mutual friend named Andy Babact who knew that I was a DC fan, and he was wanting to start a Supergirl podcast. He had started a Flash podcast, which is called the Flash Podcast, and he was hoping to start another podcast. So he asked me if I would like to be involved in that. And I said, sure, I like Supergirl. So we started a podcast then with the host at the time, Teresa, my co-host at the time, Teresa Giacino. And then eventually we expanded outwards. Teresa had to step down. And so another co-host, Carly Lane, joined the show. And then also at the same time, around that time, Morgan joined Supergirl Radio. I had done some guest spots with Morgan. She had come on to talk about the Smallville version of Supergirl with me. So, and Morgan and I have gone way back. We met during our Smallville days, Smallville watching days. So actually, I think
we met in the trenches of Smallville.
I think, Morgan, I hate to say this number out loud because it might make us old, but I feel like we may have now known each other for maybe 20 years.
Oh my
God. I don't know if I had to think about it.
And you might be right, though. I mean, Smallville was a long time ago now.
It was a long time ago. And so Morgan joined at the end of season 1, I believe. And so we've been doing Supergirl Radio together since then. So we've been podcasting about the character of Supergirl for about 11 years now. We have over 500 episodes. We do it mostly weekly. And so we have a really good time. We started out doing the podcast about the CW Supergirl show, but even after it ended, I asked Morgan, I was like, do you want to quit? I mean, if you want to quit doing the podcast, we can stop doing it. And she said, no, I love doing the podcast. And I said, I do too. And so we just kept going even after the show ended.
There's so many years of Supergirl material in the comics. There's so many other places that she's popped up. Doing this podcast, I got to watch the Supergirl, the 1980s version movie. And I was like, okay, wow, I've never seen that. So, even with us, we know so much about the character, maybe not Rebecca so much, but for me, a lot of these comics and things are, new to me. So I like having the opportunity to learn. It's kind of like having a little book club that we do weekly where I get to learn more about Supergirl's wacky backstory. And, maybe she has a clone of a robot of herself in a tree somewhere, you never know.
She does actually in the Silver Age. She does have Linda Bots in the tree. That's a real fact.
And a fantastic comeback recently in the Sophie Campbell series.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. We have been enjoying the Sophie Campbell run. She feels like one of us because every time we read something, we're like, oh my gosh, she included the Margaret Supergirl costume that is so infamous for us that we love because that costume makes no sense. But she is pulling things from the Silver Age, from the 70s era of Supergirl. And so it's a lot of fun for us to see that kind of pop back up in the run.
Absolutely. But Morgan, to your point, I say this all the time, and there's a reason why Fan Journey is in the subtitle of this podcast, because it is a journey. And even for those of us who spend so much time immersing ourselves in this world, there's so much material. We're always learning and discovering, and that's what makes it so much fun. And we were talking off mic, but let me give you your flowers on mic. I've had such a blast over these past few months going on my own Supergirl Odyssey, and I've gained such a newfound appreciation and understanding of the character, her history, her versatility, and I've really gotten a lot out of this. But, I'm parachuting in for a few months to do these episodes, but I really admire what the both of you do on a weekly basis and what you have done. And so I would say for any of our audience members who love Supergirl and you've been enjoying these episodes, make sure you check out Supergirl Radio. Yeah?
Yeah, thanks for saying that. You can go to supergirlradio.com. We're also on YouTube, youtube.com/DCTV podcast if you want to join us live on Tuesday nights, usually at 9 p.m. Eastern. So you can come join the chat there. But yeah, I think that's really cool to hear because for us, it's maybe a little frustrating because we love Supergirl so much and we wish everyone loved Supergirl as much as we did or we do. And so it's nice to hear that when people actually engage with Supergirl content, whether it be movies, TV shows, comics, whatever it is, if you actually get to know the character of Supergirl, she's actually a very good character. I mean, I'm a little biased, but I think she's a better character than Superman. But I think that she actually has a lot of depth to her and a lot of interesting aspects of her character coming from Krypton to Earth, and a lot of the things that she has been through. As she's a character that goes through a lot of trauma and a lot of horrible things in her past, but she comes out being a much more hopeful character because of it.
Absolutely. So Smallville came up a moment ago. Now, my audience knows Smallville, the television series, near and dear to me, foundational to my fandom, one of the pillars of my fandom. As I say all the time, I was the same age as Clark was in the show when I was originally watching. I watched it every week religiously for a decade. Nevertheless, in terms of my relationship with the show, I don't think, and I think the listeners would agree, I'm not overly precious about Smallville. If you tee me up about the season 8 finale Doomsday, I'll go off and I'll rant about it. So I do feel like I see the show for what it is, as much as I love it, and it does occupy a spot of invincibility in my heart. But like analytically, yes, I can recognize where I would have liked them to go in certain different directions. So I'm curious, and I'll toss this to you first, Morgan, the place that the Melissa Benoist Supergirl series occupies in your fandom. And are there aspects of the show that you wrestle with as well? Is it generally an enjoyable experience watching and looking back on it? Just curious, like I said, that spot that it occupies in your wider super fandom.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I have a very similar relationship to Smallville as you do. We're probably sort of similar ages. I was around the same ages of the characters, so I felt like I grew up with them. But then sometimes you would just get like a season or an episode where you'd be like, and they're vampires? Why are they sorority vampires? And so I feel kind of similarly about the Supergirl show. It's a little less foundational for me because I think just because I was older when we started watching it. But obviously, podcasting about it week to week, you think about it more and you consider it more on the pluses and the minuses. So I feel like I'm like maybe both too hard and too soft on Supergirl as a television show. I think that the things that it did really well, especially in the earlier seasons. I think that the casting of the show was bang on. I think Melissa Benoist is just top to bottom an amazing Supergirl. She really embodied that character and felt like such definitive casting to me that when they were talking about doing the movie, I was a little worried because I was like, oh, I don't know, like they hit gold once, can they hit gold again? And I think everything that we're seeing, Millie seems amazing. I feel very good. I feel like we're in very good hands. But Melissa was, I think, so kind of iconic in that role and brought so much of herself to that role. And I think some of the changes that they made to the character, giving her a sister, I think was a great change. I think that sister relationship in the best moments really grounded the show. In the worst moments, it was usually not present in the show. And I think the first few seasons, really good. I can recommend them without reservations to people. I'm like, hey, if you like superhero shows, you'll like this. When it gets later into the run, that's when I start not being able to defend it anymore. By the time we got to like the season where they're basically just doing a big product launch, and that's the villain.
Season 5, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the villain is corporate America in some ways, which I understand, being somebody who has to go like sit in an office in a cubicle. I was like, yeah, this also does feel like it's sucking the life out of me, but it's not like super compelling to watch. It was like season 5, a lot of it was just like, how are we going to launch this product? I was like, no, not in my entertainment, not now. And then I feel like season 6 actually got worse somehow from there. You would think that knowing that was going to be the final season, they would have regrouped and they would have been like, we got to give them something great. But it felt like it felt very phoned in. And I know that there were reasons that they were like, outside of the show reasons that probably production was harder that season.
Yeah. COVID and all that.
And I think that might've been this, Melissa might've been pregnant that season, I think. So she was in it a little bit less, but some of the decisions are like writing story decisions that I was just like, what are we even doing here? Like, what are we all doing here? Like, let's all sit down and really think about this. Like, does Lex need to fall in love with the villain of this season? Did we need this subplot? Like, what are we doing with William? Like, what's his purpose? Just a lot of really strange choices in some of the later seasons. But I do think that those early seasons are really great. And I think some of the stuff that they added into the mythology, I'm thinking like Alex Danvers, I loved. The take on Martian Manhunter. I think John Jones is great in this. I like the addition of Nia, Dreamer. I think she's a great character, even if her powers or whatever the show needed them to be this week. Sometimes she could do everything. Sometimes she could stop a tsunami. Sometimes she couldn't stop like the person in front of her. And you're like, what's happening? But I like that Nicole Maines has gotten to really pull Dreamer into the DC comics. I think that's really exciting. And like, what a legacy for the show, like regardless of anything else, what a legacy to be able to introduce a new DC superhero. So yeah, it's a little bit of a mixed bag for me with Supergirl, but overall I love it. The first seasons are so good, especially season 1 when they had a budget and they had Callista Flockhart. Like just a great show.
All right, I'm relieved because I'll be honest, heading into this episode, before I started my prep, I was looking forward to it and I knew we would have a great time, but there was a little trepidation on my part because, and I've been talking about this in our Supergirl episodes, I've had a little bit of a struggle with this show. I'll talk more about it, but it was one of those things. I'm like, oh my God, am I going to just come on here? These two, they host Supergirl Radio. They love the show and I'm going to talk about all the things I don't like. But so I'm very relieved. But what I'll also say, and I'll talk more about this as well, I really had a great time with the episodes I rewatched to make my top 10 list. I did not rewatch the entire series, so I really was cherry picking. So maybe I don't have the full view of the show fresh top of mind, but I really, really had a great time. And so I kind of came away from my homework feeling a lot better about the show than I think I had been in the years leading up to this. So again, I'm excited to compare notes, but before I talk more about my experience with the show, yeah, Rebecca, would you like to weigh in on the place that the show occupies in your fandom?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Morgan basically hit it on the nail on the head about the conflicts of the early seasons were so good, and the second half from seasons 4 to 6, they were a struggle. But I think for me personally, the journey that we went on as a podcast was really fun, because even if some of those episodes were so terrible, there's an episode in season 5 called The Bodyguard. It was the most boring episode I ever saw out of that show. To this day, I don't know if I've rewatched it, and I still just think it's so boring. But there are those kinds of episodes, but we still had so much fun discussing them and getting to talk about it with other people and analyzing it. So even if it was a struggle, the podcast was really fun. And so that's kind of what I remember from those later seasons. But on a personal note, for me with Supergirl Radio, so we started Supergirl Radio in 2015, and 2014, I actually went through breast cancer treatment. So I had gone through this whole cancer journey for about a year before Andy had approached me to start Supergirl Radio. And so for me, Supergirl Radio is kind of like the start of a new chapter in my life, where I actually got to come out of a medical situation that was, it was pretty serious. I had stage 3 breast cancer. So it was a big deal for me. So that was kind of the start of my new coming out of cancer part of my life and starting a new chapter. So it was kind of a fun way to sort of come out of that kind of hard year of my life. So on a personal note, that's kind of where I see the first part of my life. But I think for us with the show, it was just a way to have community with other listeners. That was a big goal of ours, because in the Smallville fandom, I had a hard time with the Smallville fandom personally, because I always felt like it was a place where if you disagreed about something, or if you had other thoughts about the show that people didn't like, that was not welcomed. And so I always thought, if I'm going to start a podcast, if I'm going to share my opinion with other people, I want it to be a place where everybody's opinions are welcome and at least heard, even if I disagree with them. So we always really focus on inviting people to join the conversation, whether we agree with them or not. And sometimes that's been difficult, because sometimes we have disagreed with people. But I think I'm really proud of that community aspect of Supergirl Radio. So we have a lot of fun engaging with other people about this Supergirl show.
Oh, that's amazing. That's fantastic. So I guess talking a little bit more about my mindset coming into this. So my wife and I watched this show week to week as it was originally airing until the start of season 6. And that was where we just tapped out. But until that point, or I would say at least through Crisis, I would say we were on board with the show. And it's funny, because as I was getting ready for this, I was talking to my wife. I'm like, we liked it, right? In the beginning. She was like, yeah. So we had a good time with the show. But it did eventually wear on us to the point where we stopped. And it's a weird thing. There are not many shows. I'm a lifelong avid television watcher, and it's rare for me once I'm seasons into a show to stop. But it wasn't isolated to Supergirl. I finished Arrow because there was very little left after Crisis. But after Crisis, I pretty much fell off the remaining Arrowverse shows. Not Superman and Lois, obviously. That was its own thing. But so the issues that I had with Supergirl were not limited to that show. I would apply this to the other Arrowverse shows, but I felt like we were losing the human civilian side. Everyone was a costumed character in the bunker. Plot-wise, no, I wasn't finding Leviathan and Nixley as compelling as I did Rain and the Daxamites and Sam Witwer as Agent Liberty. And I felt like there were a number of beats that you just saw repeated across the various Arrowverse shows where it all kind of felt the same and predictable. So we stopped, again, maybe, I don't know, a third of the way through season 6. And I always felt bad about it. I will admit, because people will ask, no, I did not finish and watch all of them. I have watched the series finale. I did watch that. So there's a little chunk that I haven't seen leading up to
You're
it.
good.
I'm good. Okay. But so for the years since, that's kind of been my view. Not the most positive view, because what was freshest in my mind was dropping it. But then something else happened as I got deeper into this podcast series, because while Supergirl was airing, I wasn't yet hosting Digging for Kryptonite. And it wasn't like, I stepped away from my super fandom entirely during that period, but I was not as dialed in. I just wasn't. That's been one of the blessings of doing the show, is really immersing myself in everything again. And so then a new problem emerged that I'm not breaking any new ground here. I know this has been said. I'm sure you've talked about it. I've talked about it. But it was the sort of thing that I don't think was really bumping me as I was watching the show. I'm sure I was aware of it on some level, but it wasn't bothering me. But now in retrospect, when I look back, this idea that it felt, in terms of the setup of the show, that we were plugging Supergirl into what could have otherwise been, in many respects, a Superman show. Not in every respect, but in a lot of them. And just in terms of the basic setup, the fact that she lands on Earth as a preteen, early teen, and spends the formative years of her adolescence on Earth off screen, for the most part, acclimating. And then by the time we catch up with her, she's pretty much good. And I know there are moments along the way where she talks about whether or not she fits in, and I appreciate that. But it felt like we skipped over the part that would really separate her from Superman. And then we set her at a news organization, sure, as an assistant first, but then we segue into reporter mode. And just numerous stories and dynamics along the way, for The Man Who Has Everything and Red Sun, where we are adapting Superman stories for Supergirl. And it's not that that's wrong per se, but I guess one of the themes that's emerged for me in going through all of the Supergirl content is just the takes that really sing for me are when we can zero in on what makes her distinct from Superman. And so I just looked back on the show and it just felt like we weren't always achieving that. But I want to echo what's already been said. The casting, fantastic. Melissa Benoist in particular. And what I want to say really on a positive note is just how impressed I was with the dynamic sides of the character, all the different modes of Kara and Supergirl that you get to see. She can be silly and goofy, but tough and angry and vulnerable and all the range of emotions. And I really feel like you got to see that. And it was a wonderful take. And the cast across the board. So there's a lot of positives, but I think if there's one hang up that I think I still kind of have with it, even putting aside the weaker later seasons, I think it is still that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think for me personally, I always thought the show was better when it was focusing on Supergirl mythology. Yeah, we'll be talking about an episode where Streaky not the super cat, but Streaky the cat makes an appearance, and they reference Linda Lee at one point, and Argo City comes into play a little bit in season 3. And so when those things happen and they actually utilize the Supergirl history, that's when it really, for me, was really fun. You know, the Legion of Superheroes. A lot of people associate the Legion of Superheroes with Superman, but Supergirl is also a Legionnaire, and she very oftentimes is paired with Brainiac 5. So to have Brainy on the show was really exciting. So I always wanted them to do more Supergirl things. I was actually pretty offended on behalf of Supergirl that they relied on the Superman stories to do that. But when they did, and we'll talk about one of those episodes in which they did borrow something from Superman, in which I think they actually did it better than when it was a Superman story. So I would echo that. I think if you're going to make a Supergirl TV show, lean into the Supergirl comics. I mean, what we've discovered as we go through a bunch of Supergirl runs and different parts of the history is that she actually is a very different character. I think people see her as female Superman sometimes, but she is a very different character who has a very different history. So they could have made different choices where I think the 70s, Supergirl was a camera operator at a local TV station. And so they could have done
a soap opera actress.
She was a soap opera actress in the 80s. They could have utilized those kinds of things instead of, putting her at Catco. But maybe they hadn't read that part of her history. But I think it's worth remembering that in season 1, the showrunner, Ali Adler, she had actually done a lot of research into the Sterling Gates run of Supergirl. So if you read the Sterling Gates run, you will see a lot of the things that are pulled in season 1 are kind of from that run. So it does borrow from the Supergirl comics initially. So I don't think it's unfair to critique the show in that regard, because that there are those I wish they had done more with Supergirl's history.
Yeah, we would always like read something or see something and we'd say, like, why don't they bring this person in from her history, or this character in, or this villain? But yeah, I think that's a very fair critique. It was a lot of like, okay, we're going to take this Superman story, we're going to take, instead of Red son, or it's going to be red daughter. It's like, yeah, I mean, that is technically just straight up the Superman story, but we're tweaking it. And they did a fair amount of that. And she has such a fun history and backstory. And if you go into the Superman backstory, mythology, back to like the Silver Age, you're going to find like a lot of wacky stuff. But I think that they could have pulled some of that stuff and done something interesting with it. It did seem sometimes as if they were adverse to using Supergirl's history.
And it's one of those things, I mean, I realize this now. It's like when I was watching the show a decade ago, right? This aired from 2015 to 2021.
It's crazy.
And I hadn't yet gone on my Supergirl deep dive. I mean, I had been a lifelong comic book reader and I'd seen the original movie. It's not like the character was totally unknown to me, but I did not know the depth of the lore. And so I guess I didn't know what I was missing at the time. I think that's probably another reason why it didn't necessarily bother me the first time around. But it's like now, seeing how much more there was to potentially pull from, I do kind of have that issue. But there was still so much I enjoyed about it. And yeah, Rebecca, to your point, I love the Sterling Gates influences. Obviously, Cat Grant's role.
Oh, yeah.
Clear inspiration there. And when Sterling Gates was here, he was talking about how they initially did want to use Lana as the sister type figure, but they weren't able to. And so they created the Alex Danvers character. I promise I won't keep bringing this back to Smallville. I'll do it a couple more times, but not all the time. But the Martian Manhunter, previously, did I associate Martian Manhunter with the world of Supergirl? No. But I think back to Smallville, it's like before that, I didn't really think a ton about the connection between Clark Kent and Oliver Queen, other than in the 90s, Clark was there when Ollie died. But other than that, it wasn't something that was a big driver. And now you look at those later seasons of the show and Ollie's a full-on supporting character there. And so he really forged that connection. So to give Martian Manhunter the play that they do and make him such an intrinsic part of this world. There's a lot that's really great. And I think for the most part, I can get over this hang up. And like I said, I really had a great time rewatching a lot of these episodes. So I guess on that note, shall we jump into our top 10 countdowns here?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so the two of you came up with a joint Supergirl Radio top 10, and of course I have my top 10. We'll do this the way we always do on the show here. We'll alternate. We'll count down. If there's an entry that shows up on both of our lists, we'll talk about it the first time that it comes up together. As guests, I would love to offer you the floor first. What's your? Oh, actually, wait. I have one last question. How hard was it to come up with this list? How hard or easy was it to come up with this list, especially since you were doing it together?
You want to take that, Morgan?
Yeah, you know what? I think it was surprisingly easy. It was very funny. We did this probably like a couple of days ago, right after we recorded. We're like, oh, let's put some time aside. Let's like try to figure out a joint list. And Rebecca asked me like, what are some of your top episodes? And I rattled off a couple, and she was like, yeah, those are on my list. So we just jotted them down, and we got, I think maybe we had 12, and we had to cull 2. And then when we came down to putting them in order, it was insanely simple. Like I was like, she was like, what do you think? And I was kind of like nervous. I was like, I was thinking this one, like kind of in that order. And she's like, yes, exactly. She's like, I think this one should be second and this one should be third. I was like, great. That makes sense to me. I think the only thing we really debated was when we got towards the bottom of the list, like where things should be, like, should this one be 7th? Should this one be 9th? Like, but even then I feel like we probably knocked that list out in like 10 minutes.
Yeah, it did come very quickly.
Okay, it's funny. I had a relatively easy time because I've done this now for the Superboy TV series, for Lois and Clark, and for Smallville. And I feel like I struggled more with each of those other ones, even Superboy, believe it or not. So I don't know if it's a good or bad thing that this one came a little bit more easily, but yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. So you're number 10.
I'm so excited to see what the overlap on our lists are.
Yes.
We just have the standard same list kind of.
That could happen.
Yeah, for our number 10, we actually, this might surprise people, but this is an episode that we kind of would reference quite a bit in a lot of Supergirl Radio episodes. But it's an episode called Damage, which is from season 3, and it's episode 5. And this is the episode where Lena Luthor is accused of hurting some sick children in a hospital there in National City due to this lead device that she had created. But of course, really, Lena, it was not her fault. Morgan Edge was actually the one contaminating the pool water that was hurting the children. But the reason that it always kind of stuck out in our minds is because this is actually a great Lena Luthor episode. We wanted to include a great Lena episode because Lena shows up in season 2 and she remains there until the end of the show. And Lena Luthor actually in the comics is Supergirl's best friend. And so she is in Supergirl comics quite a bit as a main player in Supergirl's mythology. And so this was an episode that we chose because we wanted a good Lena episode. And this one I think is funny to us because, and I might let Morgan talk about it, but we always kind of loved that Lena, when she wanted to go after Morgan Edge, she puts on her leather jacket. And Morgan, I think, called it her murdering jacket, and got a gun and went after Morgan Edge. And so that was always something that we sort of joked about. Anytime Lena wanted to go after somebody, she would put on her murdering jacket and go after somebody. But I think this episode is really good because Lena talks in this one about how all she ever wanted was to be good as a Luthor, and here she was accused of doing these terrible things. And so Lena was a character that I always wanted to go bad, but she maintained being the good Luthor pretty much all the way through. So Morgan, I don't know, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think you covered it really well. I think we went back and forth on this episode because we wanted to have a good Lena Luthor episode in there, because I think Lena is such a essential character to the show. As soon as she sort of comes on in season 2, she really clicks into the show, and Katie McGraw has such great casting as well. Their casting department was like 10-10, no notes. And so we went back and forth on a couple of different episodes that featured Lena, but this one I think we settled on because you kind of see the duality of Lena in this. It's a really good showcase for her. So she wants to be good. She's trying really hard to be good. But of course, everybody thinks that she did the bad thing because she's a Luthor. And towards the end, she just thinks, why don't I just do the bad thing that everybody thinks I'm doing anyway? And she puts on her murdering leather jacket. She sort of slings that thing on. She gets out her side piece she randomly has. And she decides she's going to have to kill somebody. It's just what is going to have to happen. I also think it's really funny because on the podcast, as Lena sort of progressed along the series, we started noticing that she would show up to different events dressed insanely for the event. So she would show up in a ball gown to like a work meeting, to like a board meeting.
And we'll talk about an episode in which our segment Boardroom or Ballroom was established. But Morgan, you can continue.
Yeah. So she would dress crazy, like, just like a giant fur coat for a child's birthday party or something.
She did do that one time.
And so to me, this episode also has that boardroom or ballroom aspect to it, because if you're going to have to go murder somebody who did you wrong, you need to dress the part. You need to look appropriate. You got to put on your darkest eyeshadow and your toughest leather jacket to do it.
And I will say, in rewatching some of these episodes, and we'll talk about a few of these that have some really spectacular visual effects, those early seasons, you don't see it much with the later seasons, but the budget was much bigger in the early seasons, and they had so much more to make these big planes that were like, Lena gets kidnapped by Morgan Edge at the end of this, and she's having to go in this, she's in this plane that he puts her in, and you see the plane, and it's like, wow, they actually had a visual effects budget to have this plane flying around. And so some of these early episodes, it's really fun to rewatch because they actually look pretty good. So this was another example of that.
Yeah, having just rewatched a cross-section of the series from start to finish, yes, I can attest to that. That's a great pick. That one specifically is not on my list. I have another Lena-centric one coming up. But yeah, she's such a fantastic character. And yeah, it's one of those things that, Rebecca, to your point, it's like you assume at some point she's going to go bad. Maybe a part of you wants her to go bad. And it ended up being so, and certainly there was tension along the way, but it ended up being so refreshing that they didn't go in that direction. And especially because we had another super television iteration where you had a doomed friendship. To see Kara and Lena get it right and figure it out was beautiful. And a distinction from the Superman side of things. So we appreciate that. I don't want to derail us so early on, but I'm curious about something. And, I don't know if this is touchy within the fandom. I know some people are very passionate about this, but I know there was a large contingent of fans clamoring for a romantic pairing between them. I don't even know what my question is. Is it something, or is it something that you would have welcomed? Do you think there was ever any actual potential for it? What do you hear from people? And any direction you want to take it in. I welcome any thoughts you have, because I was largely oblivious to this as it was going on. But then, I see the stuff and the hashtags on social media, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, you definitely, from my perspective, I definitely always saw the chemistry, not necessarily romantic or sexual, though, it could have been, but that wasn't where my mind went instinctively. But I know there was such a large contingent. Anything that either one of you wants to say on that front, I welcome your thoughts.
I can hop in. So I enjoyed them together. If that had been the way that the show had went, I would have been perfectly happy. I remember coming into season 2, there had been a rumor that there was going to be a character who was going to be revealed as queer. And her first scene with Lena, I was like, is it going to be Kara? Because her and Katie McGraw have such good chemistry. Melissa Benoist and Katie McGraw have such good chemistry. And I was like, okay, I could get on board with this. So I absolutely see why the fans wanted it to happen. I absolutely see why they were so excited about it. And it did feel like, especially as the show went longer and longer, that they didn't really have another love interest that was compelling for her. And so when you get to season 5, a lot of the season 5 or season 6, when they're fighting, a lot of the season is about their relationship anyway. It kind of felt like they wanted to, but they couldn't. In terms of I don't know, maybe the network, maybe the DC, maybe WB, obviously a lot of cooks in that kitchen to say, no, you can't go that way. And they still kind of hinted at it. They dropped a lot of clues, but I think that at the end of the day, a lot of it was the writing, but most of it was the performance. Katie and Melissa just really worked so well together. Those characters were so compelling together, and they never really had a good pairing for either of them that was even remotely as interesting as seeing those two characters together.
For me, I always wanted them just to be friends, because I just wanted Kara to have a friend. Because sometimes, she had the super friends, but I always felt they were also just like her work buddies. And so I liked the idea of Lena just being a friend that she could have as a friend. But I also, with anything that you do on a TV show or a movie or in a book, if you write it well, you can probably convince me that it is something worth doing. The problem with the CW show is that in the later seasons, it maybe was not written very well. But I think I could have been maybe convinced that it was the way they were trying to go if they had actually made an effort with that. But I always just liked Lena having or Kara having a friend. But it was in retrospective, it was a very major thing that people talked about. Sometimes, maybe a little too much. I felt like sometimes it overcame the rest of the show. But it was something that a lot of fans speculated on and wanted to talk about, and we would have listeners who would write in about it. So it was a subject of discussion, but the show ultimately didn't decide to go that way.
I believe I saw a breakdown of fan fiction on I can't remember what site it was, and I think Kara and Lena are still the number one queer woman ship on that. I don't know if it's archive of our own or whatever it is, but years later, they still have the most fan fiction written for them. So that community, that fan community is still thriving, obviously. And I think one of the things, if you were watching the show and you were kind of in the fandom and you said, oh, Cara and Lena, like people would know. So it is kind of one of the things about the show that people still remember and talk about. So in that way, it was like a lasting legacy of the show, is that when I saw that, the Sophie Campbell run was going to have Lena in it, I was like, oh, yay, Cara and Lena back together.
Nice. All right. No, I appreciate your perspectives on this, because I feel like I've brought this up in a couple of recent episodes and my guest wouldn't touch it. And I feel like I ended up cutting it out.
Listen, the fans, they feel passionately on all sides. They feel passionately. And I will say, as hosts of Supergirl Radio, we have made all of the fans, I think, mad at us at some point. We have the Cara and Lena people have yelled at us. The Mon-El people have yelled at us. I'm sure there's some fringe character that right now, as we speak, they're writing an email. They're not happy. So yeah, I do understand why people would be like, yeah, I'm not touching it. I'm not doing it.
You could have the best of intentions like we always did, and you would still step on a landmine. So it is a very sensitive matter to a lot of people. But we always try to approach it as openly as we could with people. If they wanted to share, if that was a thing that they really liked about the show, we would engage in conversation with them about it.
Yeah.
And we had viewers or listeners across the spectrum. We would have people write into us about, oh my God, I love this Cara and Lena moment on the show. And we'd have people who wrote in who were like, I can't hear about this super core thing one more time, like, lose it. So, I think it also for us, we got really a well-rounded view from our listeners. A lot of people were really excited about it. There were people who didn't care for it at all. So I think people wanted us to talk more about it on the podcast, but we were honestly, mostly just talking about what was in front of us on the screen, and they never went there on the screen. Right. So
yeah, no, I'm glad we spent a couple of minutes on this. I appreciate everyone's passion. Yeah. Again, for myself, while I didn't necessarily see it in that way, I think I would have been open to it if the show went down that road. I think for me, I'm glad that the show didn't define Cara by her love life and who she was with. I think that was great. At the same time, and Morgan, what you said a moment ago kind of sparked this. It's like, it would have been nice if she had somebody, even at the end, even if it wasn't her sole reason for being. I'm glad that it wasn't, but at the same time, it could be part of the human experience. So yeah, I always kind of wish that they paired her with someone at some point once we got past the Mon-El business. I know we had William Day, but that didn't really ever seem to be much of anything. But in any event, I'm glad that we addressed that. So my number 10, this was not a rule that every season had to be represented, but in my gut, I wanted each season to have a spot somewhere. And like I said, I didn't watch a lot of season 6, but I did. Previously, I had seen large chunks of the series finale, but this time I sat down and I watched the series finale, Cara, season 6, episode 20, all the way through. Now, if they said the word empower once, they said it 15 times. It wasn't exactly subtle. Mm-hmm. And I was coming in.
Power was the theme of season 6.
And I was coming in at the tail end of all the Lex and Nixley business, fine. But when you get to the back half of that series finale, I really appreciated how much they focused on the emotion and those personal relationships. And to have Mon-El come back and James and Wynn, and you reunite the original 3 super friends, everything from an emotional standpoint felt like it came full circle. And I really just found myself moved by it in a way that I wasn't expecting to, given my overall feelings towards season 6. I almost didn't even pop it in. I figured I have my list, I'm good to go. But I had rewatched enough at that point. And I was like, no, why don't you just put a button on it? And because I had rewatched pretty much all the premieres and finales more or less. And I said, no, let me put this in. And like I said, I was really moved by it. The aspect of it that I do wrestle with is Cara's ultimate conclusion, obviously spurred by Cat Grant's advice to do away with this dual identity that is no longer serving her, because she feels like she's bifurcated and she's not whole. And I've talked at length about this in the past, because obviously during the Brian Michael Bendis run of the Superman comics, and then in the final season of Superman and Lois, we veered into the same sort of territory. And the view in each of those instances that I've cited, the view towards the secret identity is not one that I share. I don't look at it as this negative thing that's holding either of the characters back. However, I'm more okay with it in the Supergirl space. I feel like it fits better there, or I'm just more okay with it. And I felt like in the context of this show and that finale where we really want to move her forward and leave her in a different place than where we started, it worked for me in a way that I wasn't expecting it to. So I think for all of those reasons, the series finale, Kara, earns its spot at number 10 on my list.
Yeah, I think that's fair, actually. The emotional moment in that episode that I always hold on to is when Kara puts down the glasses. Because I remember early on in the show's run, I can't remember if it was a showrunner interview or if it was Melissa Benoist talking about it, but they emphasized that anytime Kara takes her glasses off, that's a very meaningful thing for her. There's some sort of emotion connected to her glasses that she's putting back on this secret identity, or she's taking it off. So if she had some like really emotional thing and she removed the glasses, that had some sort of weight to it. And so the fact that they actually did that was one of those things they actually did. That was a character choice I think they made early on that they carried through the entire run of the show. And so by the end of it, when you see her take those glasses off and choose to leave them there, I think for me that really was a nice end to her series arc and her character arc that she was willing to let go of some of that emotion that she carried with her through those glasses.
Yeah, I liked the character stuff that they had in the finale. I liked bringing back the original three, the Super Friends, and I liked the moments that she had with Alex and with Lena. I think all that stuff is so great. Unfortunately, the season 6 storyline craziness where, Lex and Nixley are fighting and somebody's a lizard person for 30 seconds and they never explain it. I feel like for me, unfortunately, that brings down the finale, but those moments at the end of the finale and the stuff about Kara, I think was really strong. So strong that I kind of wish they had wrapped up the season storyline like an episode before the finale and had just let the finale be about Kara and the characters and wrapping up their individual storylines versus like we gotta go and to the Phantom Zone again or whatever it was that they did in that episode.
Thankfully, the Phantom Zone business, it was mercifully short. I was so pleased when that portal opens and the Phantoms come, I'm like, all right, here we go. And then they just grab Lex and Nixley and like, perfect. And I will say, having not struggled through the preceding episodes, it didn't bother me as much, the bit that we did get there. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I get what we're doing here. That's totally fine. But no, the fact that they let the emotional side of that finale breathe as much as they did, I really, really appreciated. I did have a comment from one of our patrons, Edwin, who said the show had heart. However, its finale attempted something that Superman and Lois would later do better with the identity reveal. And given how that show handled those consequences, it makes the Supergirl finale worse in hindsight. Edwin, I appreciate that. I disagree, though. I really had far more objections with the Superman and Lois handling of this than I do here, especially here, even though I don't love the fact that everyone in the cast is a super friend.
Oh my God.
But that makes it, but at the same time, it's like, well, how many civilians are even in her life that she would have to worry about their safety at that point? So
at this point,
it made me more okay with it. Whereas on Superman and Lois, and I know they were really hamstrung by budget cuts, but it's like you see a couple of tanks at the farm driving away, and it's like, oh, everything's just fine now. Oh, so I actually preferred this here. So that earns its spot on my list. All right, your number 9.
Yeah, and I think we should, I don't know if we mentioned this when we did our number 10, but this was kind of like our favorite episode. So I guess you could do top 10 lists different ways of like what the best episodes were, or, the most outrageous episodes
definitive
or whatever. The definitive episodes.
That's not how we played it.
We decided to go kind of like our Supergirl Radio favorite episodes here. So number 9 is Legion of Superheroes, which is from season 3. It's episode 19. And this is when Morgan mentioned boardroom or ballroom. This is actually the episode where that starts, where Lena's wearing something crazy and the something inappropriate for the Catco workplace. But this is also the episode where Brainy gets to spend a lot of time with Kara. Kara's in a kind of a coma in her mind prison. And so she is there with Brainy's able to get into her mind prison through some sort of science DEO, something or other, futuristic Legion science that they have. And he's able to go into her mind and talk to her to get her out of this mind prison that she is in. And so I think it's a real meaningful episode where she gets to think back about her coming to Earth and how she befriended this cat, this black cat she called Streaky, and it being able to pet him and practicing that enabled her to be able to practice being near something else and not hurting it. And so things like that I thought were really endearing about this episode. And then obviously this is the first time you get to see Brainiac 5, played by Jesse Rath, who did such a good job. So I think this one is a great episode because it also, like we mentioned earlier, it taps into Supergirl's mythology as a Legionnaire. And so that was really, really fun to get to see them jump into season 3.
Nice. Did you have anything on that one, Morgan?
Yeah, that one, I really enjoyed that one. I like seeing the Legion. I think we talked about this earlier, but Supergirl has a long history with the Legion of superheroes, and I think it was really great to bring those characters into a Supergirl show, and to show her connection with them. And then obviously for our podcast, the birth of our boardroom or ballroom segment, which years ago I was at San Diego Comic-Con and I was in the press rooms for Supergirl, and Katie came to our table and I just sort of I didn't have it as one of my questions, but there was a lull and I was like, well, our podcast has this segment called Boardroom or Ballroom, and she was dying and she was like, I complain about this all the time. She's always wearing open-toed shoes in the lab.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that was one of the ones I rewatched. That was a standout. And actually, on that note, we have another patron question. This is from Jim with the Long Live the Legion podcast. He says, I'm required by law to ask what you thought of the Legion appearances and Mon-El. So, I mean, I'll piggyback off of what you've already said. Yeah, I enjoyed what we saw of the Legion in this show. Obviously, we do have a departure here in terms of Mon-El being the founder and Supergirl's legacy specifically being the inspiration, not Superboy. But I think that certainly worked in this story. Loved Jesse Rath as Brainy. Really enjoyed that performance. And Imra, not what I would have expected based on past interpretations, but I really ended up quite liking her in that role as well. So I found the Legion to be a welcome presence. In retrospect, I'm kind of surprised we didn't get more of them, right?
Yeah.
But I think what they did worked well.
Yeah, I would have been totally game for more Legionnaires showing up on the show. I thought Brainiac 5 was a standout, and of course he stayed. He didn't leave. He came and he stayed. And Mon-El was a source of contention for a lot of people. But
I've gleaned that.
I'm mostly we had a sliding scale for
we had
Mon-El.
A sliding scale for Mon-El of how we felt about him episode to episode, and we would be either Mon positive or Mon negative, sometimes Mon neutral. But yeah, there are strong feelings on both sides about Mon-El.
Yeah, he when he came back and he had the beard. Once he had the beard, for some reason that changed opinions. He seemed better with the beard. And there's an episode called Fort Roz. It's actually the death of Livewire. When Livewire dies, Imra's in that episode, and so it's really that's a fun episode to watch if you want to see Livewire, Sai, who is a known Supergirl villain, and Imra team up to go into Fort Roz. So that's a pretty good episode. So even if I thought some of the Imra stuff was kind of lacking, that's a good use of Imra in that episode.
Yeah, and I mean, she proved to be quite selfless, giving Mon-El the space that she did give him to figure everything out. So I will say, I was I know this may be controversial, but no, I enjoyed Mon-El on the show and the journey that he went on and the maturity that you saw, especially when he came back. That was another one. Like my wife and I were invested in that Kara Mon-El pairing. I think my wife might have just had a crush on Chris Wood. I don't know, but we were fans of that character. So yeah, overall, like I said, pleased with the Legion side to the extent that we got it. Unrelated, but Jim does also ask, while we're talking controversial things, although maybe this isn't that controversial, skirt or bodysuit?
Ooh. Morgan, you want to take that one first?
I like the skirt. I think the skirt is cute. I don't have like deep opinions based on like years of comic lore. I'm just like, I think the skirt is cute and I prefer it.
Yeah, the reason that the pants came in season 5 is because Melissa Benoist, they would always say pants. They shot the show in Vancouver, Canada, where it is very cold, especially in the wintertime, the fall and the wintertime. So it was mostly changed due to a practical nature of Melissa just being warmer wearing pants. I'm with Morgan. I prefer the skirt. I know logistically the skirt might not make sense given her flying abilities, but I think it visually distinguishes her from Superman, and so that's another reason that I like it. It is that the skirt to me is very Supergirl. So I don't mind the pants, but I prefer the skirt.
I agree with all of that, and not to be negative about anyone's appearance, but the bigger problem I had in season 5 was the bangs. It wasn't
the bangs.
Oh yeah,
no, the bangs were a much more bigger problem than the pants.
Much more controversial.
And when we talked about Lois and Clark, I complained about Terry Hatcher's haircut in season 3. Very superficial over here. I apologize, but you spend a lot of time, you're watching these characters, you get used to them in a certain way. So, but yeah, the costume wise, I'm open, but overall, yeah, I gravitate more towards the skirt. Okay. My number 9 is season 4, episode 3, Man of Steel, the Ben Lockwood origin story, the Sam Witwer acting showcase here.
Oh, Sam Witwer's great, isn't he?
Look, really, he did a great job on Smallville in season 8 with what they gave him. And I'll leave it at that because I've talked about that enough. But here I felt like there was a lot more for him as a performer to sink his teeth into. And my understanding is, I know you would both know better than me, but at the top of season 4, Melissa Benoist was on Broadway. I think they shot a little bit out of order. She wasn't there right at the top of the season. I think that's why we ended up.
I think that's right. Yeah, she was in Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think that's why we ended up with this Ben Lockwood centric outing early on in the season. But to really spend the time investing in one of your primary antagonists for the season and showing how he becomes radicalized against aliens, which of course became the theme of that season, this anti-alien sentiment, seeing his starting point as he's butting heads with his dad right at the factory, and then seeing how he gets injured trying to stop that riot. And then of course the factory closes and he loses his job at the university, and it's fine. And it's one of those things you don't agree with him, right? You're not seeing it the way he does, hopefully not. But it is one of those things where it's like, you do understand how he got to that point. And I felt like it would have been really easy to just plop him in there and he's spouting this anti-alien rhetoric, and maybe you get a couple of lines of backstory or something like that, or a flashback. But to actually have spent the time tracking that journey, I thought was time well spent. And yeah, I love Sam Witwer. And yes, I think a big part of it was the Smallville fan in me happy to see him, but also happy for it to have like redemption in the Superman space, so to speak, because I really loved him in that role, and he just brought a lot of humanity to it. So that's my pick for number 9.
That's a really solid choice, actually. And Agent Liberty comes from there's part of Agent Liberty is in that Sterling Gates run with Superwoman. So there's some Agent Liberty in there. So he does have a Supergirl connection. Very different, though, in the Superman stories. He's not a villain. So they really took a turn with Agent Liberty. And the show, much to my dismay, did a lot of what we refer to. I don't think we would say political episodes, but we called them topical episodes to sort of smooth that over. I didn't love the way they handled a lot of these topical episodes. I didn't think they did them very well, but that episode actually gave a fair perspective on his side of things, which was very rare for the show. And so you can kind of imagine, like, that episode allows me as a viewer to step inside his shoes to think about how he sees what's going on. Because we used to joke that, like, you know, living in National City in every May, something would go crazy. And so
I would constantly be wanting to know about the National City, like, real estate market. I was like, this is what I want to dive deep into. Like, can you just buy a house for a penny there? Like, it's probably going to get destroyed in the next invasion or, you know, explosion or whatever is going to happen in May. Like, you're not safe. You're never safe in National City.
Yeah. Does everybody just leave in like April and then come back around August or August?
Maybe
or
they
September?
just know. Yeah. Maybe they just, it's funny because I'm rewatching Power Rangers with my 7-year-old son. And even he's now gotten to the point. It's like, why do people live in Angel Grove? And I'm like, hey man, I don't know. And it's always funny because they make a point where Zordon is like, oh, the monster's attacking the abandoned warehouse district. Thankfully, the monsters in that show, they always start with the abandoned warehouse district.
So
thankfully.
thoughtful.
That's really considerate of them.
Yes, really considerate. So I do like that idea that it shows you kind of what a person who lives in National City might think about all of the things that happen around them. Because a lot of the Supergirl show was about Supergirl and her super friends. And sometimes you wouldn't get that perspective of like the average National City citizen who had to live with all this stuff going around. So I did think that perspective, it was nice to see them actually like explore that perspective of somebody who lived in National City.
I was going to say, I think to your point about Sam Witwer, I think Sam Witwer is so good. I thought he was great on Smallville, even though, you know, obviously there were some issues with the storyline, but I never thought that there were any issues with his performance. And I've seen him in some other shows. I saw him Being Human. Obviously, he's done a lot of Star Wars stuff on the voice side. And so I think I'm a fan of Sam Witwer. So when he popped up, I was like, score, Sam Witwer. And I thought he did such a good job in humanizing this villain and making you understand how he got from point A to point B. And I think like a more well-rounded villain is always more interesting to watch than somebody who is just kind of like mustache twirlingly evil without any sort of shades of gray or depth to them at all. And so I thought that they did a good job, like taking a step back, taking us ground level, like this is what it's like to live in National City while, you know, they're having their 5th alien invasion. And this is how somebody like this character would get to where he is, would get to this level of villainy. And you could kind of understand his thought process, not that you would support it or be in favor of it or anything, but like you could understand how he became a villain, and that made him a better villain. It made him more compelling to watch. I think that Sam Witwer would have done a great job even if he didn't get a spotlight episode, but I think it really did make him more compelling to watch for the rest of the season.
Yeah, there were just more dimensions to that character. It's funny because part of me was like, do I devote a spot on my top 10 to an episode that barely has Supergirl in it? But when I rewatched it truly was compelling. Also, this is not the only instance on my list here, but what they do here is something that I do quite like, where they mine the show's own history as we're following along in time and we're jumping ahead and we're revisiting events from a different perspective. I do like when they do that. So yeah. And then on the political front, not to wade too much into those waters, but it did strike me because in rewatching the season 4 finale, when Kara writes the article exposing what Lex has done, and everyone gets pinged on their phone because everyone's supporting Lex. They think he's the hero at this point. And then they all read the article and the scales fall from everyone's eyes and they instantly turn around, and I'm like, boy, is that optimistic.
Would it be nice if that's how it worked?
I was like, man, that's probably the most fantastical. Yeah, that's the most fantastical aspect of this show. It's like, well, okay.
Kara Danvers is such a good writer.
She's just that good. All right, so that was my number 9. Your number 8.
So Morgan, would you like to talk about our number 8 pick?
Sure, I advocated for this one on the list. I was like, I think we need this one. Number 8 for us is Alex. It's season 2, episode 19. So this is the one where Alex Danvers wants Kara and her new girlfriend Maggie to kind of bond and get along, but the problem is that Maggie is not so fond as a police officer of Supergirl. I don't know why. What? Because of the vigilante aspect. And but what ends up happening, what ends up bonding Kara and Maggie, or Maggie and Supergirl, is that Alex gets kidnapped, and she gets kidnapped by Rick Malvern, which, as Rebecca kindly pointed out in this doc that we have, is a nod to Dick Malvern, which was Linda Lee's, or Linda Danvers' boyfriend in the Silver Age comics. He's not quite as cuddly in this version, although he's kind of terrible in the comics as well. So maybe this was a homage that worked. So he kidnaps Alex, and she has to kind of escape on her own. She has to use her own wits to get out of the situation. She ends up, I think, digging out a subdermal tracker, like out of her skin herself. She uses her belt to punch through this glass. She's like in this tube and it's filling up with water. But the thing I always mention, and have mentioned for years now because it made such an impression on me, is that at one point when she's in this tube and it's filling with water, she uses her pants as a flotation device. Now, in a similar situation, I would simply die. I would not think to do that. So I think it was a great spotlight episode for Alex in particular, because it shows like how smart, how capable she is, even though she's often saved by Supergirl because Supergirl is her sister, Kara is her sister. Alex Danvers can get herself out of a pinch. Like, Alex Danvers can handle her own business. And I thought it was so cool to get an episode that was really so focused around Alex and what she was capable of, even outside of her relationship at the DEO and with Supergirl.
Yeah, and in addition to all of that, it's a well-written episode, because then the fact that Maggie and Supergirl have to team up together to help try to save Alex brings them a little closer and develops that relationship. So I think it's a pretty well-rounded episode in that way. So yeah, we talk about Alex saving herself by her own pants quite a bit. So that's a really great Alex Danvers episode.
I almost forgot this too, but there's a Lena Luthor and Queen Rhea subplot. So Queen Rhea at the time is Mon-El's mother, is a Daxamite, and so she kind of like connects with Lena, and I thought that was funny. I believe this is when like right before Lena gets like kidnapped by the Daxamites. There's also a moment where Kara says she stands for help, hope, and compassion, which was a nice nod to Sterling Gates' Adventures of Supergirl run. So there was a lot of nice little Easter eggs specifically to Supergirl specific things in this episode, besides just being the great Alex Pants episode. It also had some really good Supergirl moments and Easter eggs as well.
Awesome. I don't have anything really specific to add, but I love the character and that she got a spotlight. This wasn't one that I rewatched, so it's not top of mind, but that's a fantastic pick. And yeah, I mean, such a rich addition to the show and everything that opened up. So fantastic. All right, my number 8. It's funny, we've not had any overlap here yet.
I know.
Which is good. It keeps it interesting. Makes the episode a little longer, but it keeps it interesting. I don't know. Maybe this is on yours. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's much higher. But my number 8 is Falling, the Red Kryptonite episode from season 1, episode 16. Do you have that one?
Yeah, so that is on our top 10 list. We have that pretty high. It's at number 3 for us.
As I was putting it, I said to myself, this might be a little low, but I keep doing it. If anyone wants to go back and restart and play a drinking game every time I mention Smallville, you'll probably have a good time. But look, I come from the world of Smallville. We had banger Red Kryptonite episodes throughout that show's run.
That is so true.
So I think for me, maybe I was expecting a little something different, but I quite enjoyed this. And what I appreciated here was that, to me, it didn't feel like just a ripoff on the Smallville version of Red Kryptonite. Like, I really felt that the lane that they took Kara down. You saw her striking in various ways, with a lot more force and purposefulness in her personal life, not even on the superhero side, like coming on to James at the club and ratting Siobhan out to Cat Grant because she was trying to go behind Cat's back to Perry White. So it was obviously shades of like what we had seen on Smallville when those inhibitions come down, but I didn't feel like it was just duplicating what we had seen before. And striking moments like when Supergirl drops Cat from the building and obviously catches her, but things like that really stood out. But I think what sold this for me even more was when Kara comes out of it, and this is after she's said some really hurtful things to Alex, and she finally comes to and breaks down, gets really emotional over what she's done, this realization. And going back to what I said at the top, just the different shades of the character that you get to see and the different kinds of emotions. And so to really see her grappling with what she had done, it was really resonant. So I feel like this kind of ran the gamut of emotion this episode, and I really quite liked it. So that's my number 8.
Yeah, I think this is a standout episode for us, and I think I can confidently say that for Morgan as well. But I actually blame Smallville for people's misunderstanding of Red Kryptonite because
sure, I got you.
Actually, Red Kryptonite originally was an unpredictable thing. If a Kryptonian was infected by red kryptonite, you could grow 3 heads or, become a mermaid. Red kryptonite would do things that were unpredictable. So I think Smallville might have started the trend that red kryptonite, dropped all it made you experience inhibitions and made you kind of carefree and like you don't care about other people and stuff like that. So I sort of blame Smallville for people misunderstanding red kryptonite, but it's fine. That's the way mythology goes. Things grow and change. But I actually really love Red K. Kara in this because it gave Melissa something different to play. And what's fun as for me as a fan of season 1 is that Red K. Kara is essentially her Aunt Astra. She dresses and acts like Astra, and so she really Melissa did a good job, I thought, of like trying to embody the character that Laura Benanti played, almost as if she had worked with her so much that she understood how she was playing that. And so there's funny bits about Red K. Kara where she's actually better at her job as Red K. Kara, things like that. And she rides on Cat's elevator in Catco, which nobody else does. That's Cat's elevator. Nobody else is supposed to go in there and ride that elevator. And so there are kind of comedic things about Red K. Kara. But what always sticks out to me about this episode is that after she sort of comes off this like a synthetic red kryptonite, the first thing she asks is, "Did I kill anyone?" And Melissa Benoist, her performance in that is so good because Kara feels that so deeply that she must have felt like, oh no, I terrorized people. What did I do? And so I think that Kara, when she comes out of that, is so wanting to know what she did. And so I think for me, that's the moment I always think about with this episode. But I think it's just a solid episode from start to finish.
When I think of my top scenes from Supergirl, the TV show, that scene where she comes out of the Red K kryptonite and she asks, like, did I kill anybody? And she starts crying. That's a scene I always think about. Like, that is a scene that feels like it was like imprinted on my mind in terms of like the performance from Melissa was so good. And, you're talking about big things that are happening, kind of over the top things that are happening, but she really did ground that performance in like a sense of truth. Like, I felt that Kara was really hurting in that moment, and I felt what she was feeling. And I think that's just, that performance really does elevate the whole episode up. But I think it's also just a really fun episode. It's a really good episode. We get to see different shades of Kara. We get to see what would Kara be like if she was bad. Which, again, as Rebecca said, I also for a very long time didn't understand that red kryptonite wasn't just the kryptonite that made Superman bad, because Smallville, all those Red K episodes on Smallville were always so good. Every time that there was Red Kryptonite, I was like, oh, we're in for a little treat. But I think also, the trend continues. I think this was such a good episode of Supergirl as well. So listen, if you're doing a Kryptonian show, the Red K episode's going to be good.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, multiple characters call her out on this. It's like, even if the Red K brought some of these things out, there was some underlying truth, something that she had been keeping in. So it definitely sheds a lot of light on the internal life of the character that you don't always get to see or hear. And yeah, I mean, like I said, just the how purposeful she was. Because I guess when I think of the Smallville Clark Red K iteration, it felt more just kind of freewheeling, like he's doing whatever he feels like. Whereas here, it just felt more like there was, I don't know if strategy is the right word, but it's like she has these very purposeful objectives and she is obtaining them, like with Siobhan, for example, or James in the club. So yeah, this was really an absolute standout. So maybe I regret putting it as low as I did, but it's on there. It's on there. Okay, so that was my number 8. And what is your number 7?
So number 7 for us is Livewire, which is season 1, episode 4. And there was a situation where I think it might have supposed to have been episode 5. It got switched in the broadcast airing, but I think it's actually episode 4. And this is the introduction of Leslie Willis as Livewire. And I think Livewire for us at Supergirl Radio was such a great villain. And she popped up, I think, 3 times. And it was always just actually, wait, hang on. We Can Be Heroes. We Can Be Heroes, 4 Raws, and the World's Finest crossover. So four times. And so anytime Livewire showed up, it was a real treat. And it's fun to watch those episodes and see Kara's relationship with Livewire sort of develop over time. But she's just such a good villain in this episode. She takes over Catco's monitors and, broadcasts her whole self up there. And what's interesting is that Cat Grant is referred to on the show as the queen of all media, but Livewire on Superman the animated series was actually the queen of all media. And so it's neat in this episode that Livewire and Leslie and Cat have this relationship where Cat was sort of her mentor in a little bit of a way. And so I think it's interesting to put those two queens of all media together and to see Cat actually care about someone was, early on in the show, that really stood out to me, that when Leslie was in the hospital, Cat goes to see her. And so I think that gave Cat a little more humanity, that she actually cared about somebody. And so there's a lot of good Supergirl stuff where she fights Livewire and she has a lot of attitude with Livewire, which is really fun. So I think for me, when I think about some of my favorite episodes that I rewatch, Livewire is one of those.
Yeah, I really love that episode. I think it's so fun. I think it really starts to set up the characters because it's pretty early in the run in season 1. But I when I think of the Supergirl villains from the TV show, I often think of Livewire like one of the first ones, just because every time they brought her back, it felt like she really added to the show. Some of the villains, when they brought them back, Lex, had diminishing returns. I'm just going to say it. They would bring the villain back and the villain would do the exact same thing that they had done the season before and the season before that. And so even if you enjoyed them in one season, by the time that they were being brought back, you'd be like, oh God, not this again. But I never felt that with Livewire. I feel like every time she popped up in the series, I was like, okay, it's a Livewire episode. I'm about to have a really good time. I think that that the actress was really great. I think that the character really gave us a different side of Cat. And I think that this was overall just like a fun episode that kind of shows you like what the show is going to be like, and it is really putting a good foot forward. I can't remember was this season? It was season 1. I can't remember what exact episode.
Yeah, I think this is season 4. So it was pretty early.
It was episode the first 4. Mm-hmm. Yeah, episode 4. And I think it's a really strong early season episode to really like kind of hit the ground running. Like, this is what this show is going to be.
Right on. I don't mean to be a party pooper, but I've just never Going back to watching Superman the Animated Series as a little kid, I just never really was into Livewire. I'm open, and I think Josh Williamson has been using her in recent Supergirl or Superman comics, and she's been writing for the Daily Planet, and I'm coming around a little bit, but I've still never been the biggest Livewire. But maybe I'll have a journey with that character at some point. But well said, and that's a very solid early series pick. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. Step into the refraction with Drunken Avenger #1, The Volunteer, an indie comic by Rick Reason that turns the tropes upside down. 4 men died in 9 seconds. John Stevens survived, but survival has a price. Now, the government calls him a variable. The media calls him the Drunken Avenger. And the city of Meridian is caught in the crossfire between civil liberty and national security. Follow @Drunken Avenger on social media for project updates and previews. Ever wonder what would happen if a person who knew barely anything about comics decided to absorb hundreds of Superman stories from all eras and media? That's exactly what Robbo is doing on This Podcast Will Never Die, which starts with all the ways the Man of Steel stood out on the newsstands in 1938. Listen and subscribe to This Podcast Will Never Die, and you'll never look at Superman's trunks the same way again. We love digging into epic comic book runs, but what about the art of the single issue? Single Bound is a podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics, many of them starring the Man of Steel, Logan's favorite character. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram @SingleBoundPodcast. All right, so that was your number 7. My number 7 is Luther's. Season 2, episode 12. Did that make it onto yours?
Very nearly made it onto our list.
We talked about it, yeah.
Okay. I mean, we've already talked a good bit about Lena, so I won't dwell on this, but just getting Lena's backstory I found really interesting, and you find out that even though we and she had known that she was adopted, you find out that she is also the biological daughter of Lionel and thus the half-sister of Lex, and you get much more of that dynamic with Lillian. And more than anything, though, what I appreciated about this was the faith, the trust that Kara puts in Lena over the protestations of everyone else on the show. And she, she really holds her ground and proves to be right in the end. But I just really liked that faith that she had in her new friend, and that it proved to be well-founded. And it's one of those things, like we've already mentioned, you'll see over the course of the show, the back and forth between them. And when they do have their falling out over her identity and over Lena's experiments with the black kryptonite and all of that. But still, I think this episode is such a fundamental part of that foundation between them. And so just having that Lena spotlight, getting the backstory, and seeing Kara's faith in her, really, really enjoyed this one. Except for the fact that Lionel is bald. Lionel must have a flowing mane. This is a non-negotiable.
Very important to the character. Like in response to Lex losing all of his hair, Lionel's hair gets more aggressively beautiful. I think that's an important part of the father-son dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, 1,000%. That's the one thing I'm like, guys, like if you take nothing else from Lionel, it must be that flowing hair. Come on. But other than that, I really enjoyed that episode.
I think they make up for it, though, because I think that episode has Lillian with the pearls on. I always loved it when Lillian tried to pass herself off as this, person who wore these, beautiful suits with the pearl necklaces and all that kind of stuff, even though she was terrible. She was an awful human being. But sometimes she would portray herself as this very sophisticated lady. But yeah, I think that's the episode also with the young Lex and young Lena playing chess as well.
Yep.
So those flashbacks I think are really well done.
Yeah, it's so funny that this was on your list, because I would say up until like pretty close to us recording, we were back and forth about our number 10 spot. It was between Damage and Luther's, and we were like, I don't know, but the good the flashbacks are so good, but that murder and leather jacket. So this one very nearly made our list too. It's a really good Lena episode, but also I love the Luthers. They're just crazy. And anytime you get like a crazy Luther family dynamic, whether it's like Lena and Lex trying to have a conversation or Lillian, they're really compelling characters to have on screen. So I think that this is a great pick.
And we did an episode earlier on in this event, the Luther family tree, and we looked at all of Lex's relatives across time and media. And I think we pretty much got everybody. There was one very obscure character from the Legion animated series that I missed. But other than that, I think we were pretty thorough. It was a lot of fun. So I don't want to rehash this, but what I said there is I do think there's some version of like a Luther take on Succession that would be really compelling to watch.
Yes.
At the same time, I also don't love surrounding Lex with too many, he doesn't need to be in the center of this wacky bunch, but I think when done effectively, and I think this show, I think for the most part does a good job with that. So yeah, just getting to kind of flesh out those dynamics within the family. Very, very intriguing.
Now, when you did your Luther family tree, I think we both must know, did you get to Nasty Luther?
Oh, of course.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. No, we were very, I mean, the only thing I purposely disclaimed were alternate universe, Elseworld type things, but because I was like, I got to draw the line somewhere here. But no, we were. I think we were thorough.
We're big fans of Nasty Luther.
Right on. All right, so that's my number 7. Your number 6.
So our number 6 is actually the 100th episode of Supergirl. It's titled "It's a Super Life." It's from season 5, episode 13. So this is the episode where Supergirl and the fifth dimensional imp, Mxyzptlk, or Mixie as most people called him, kind of go through Supergirl and Kara's relationship with Lena and their friendship, and trying to fix a moment in time where Lena has now gotten mad at Supergirl. And so the episode really focuses in on their friendship over the years. And so I think this episode is a real standout because it's honoring the show and the show history, but also Thomas Lennon as Mixie was such a delight. He really leaned into the character and the magical nature of the character, and his dynamic with Kara, with Melissa Benoist, I thought was really great because Kara at that point had Mixie encounters before, and so he wasn't as much of a nuisance to her in this moment as an ally to help her, and so she sort of tries to help him as he's helping her. And so I really loved the way that they bounced off of each other. And there were some fun things like with the VHS tapes that they were using and things like that. So it's just a fun episode to watch. And especially for somebody like me who did want Lena Luthor to go evil, this was like the one chance I got to see it where basically in the episode, Lena, in this storyline, in one of the instances, Lillian makes Lena sort of a Metallo Lena. And so that was the one time I got to see Lena go fully evil and fight Supergirl. So a lot of highs for this episode, especially in a season that wasn't so great. Season 5, this was a big standout.
It's my number 3, actually.
Oh, nice.
For all those reasons.
Yeah, this one was great. It really... It honored the show. It takes you back into previous seasons. You see actors and characters that you haven't seen in a long time. And it's a really fun what if. It's, obviously it's a wonderful life, but it's these moments that Kara could have made different choices. And obviously every version of the reality just kind of reinforces that apparently not telling Lena was the right move, which is crazy. I was like, okay, writers. Yeah, I guess that was right. But I also thought it was funny how in each reality, like things would just suddenly start going awry. Like things would start going well, and then suddenly they would go awry very quickly. But I thought it was a great walk back into the past of the show and really respected what the show has done in the past seasons, and it was a great way to celebrate 100 episodes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Thomas Lennon, fantastic Mixie. He's still no Howie Mandel. Howie Mandel still is my number one Mixie, believe it or not.
That's fair.
but yeah, he was great. I was very happy with the second attempt at the character. And as I already said, I love these tours through the show's own history and revisiting those events. And it's one of those things, it kills. I always wanted Smallville to do a version of this with Clark and Lex. And it's one of the things that I feel like they always left on the table. So I was so happy that Supergirl did this. And to really impart this lesson, because it's easy for her, for any character, for us, you look back, you beat yourself up. What if I had done this? What if I had done that? Well, here are all of the different scenarios, and it doesn't necessarily play out any better. In fact, it's worse and apocalyptic in certain instances. So I think that was, we know our heroes can be burdened a lot of the times, and to sort of lift that a bit from Kara at that point to say, like, look, this is what it is. And I do love that final moment she has with Lena of like, look, this is where we are. Like, ball's in your court now. I really, really appreciated that. So from a character standpoint, but also, yeah, for the 100th episode to celebrate what the show had been. An absolute stand. I really, really, really love that one. All right. So that was, let's see. Okay. That was your number 6. My number 6 is World's Finest, season 1, episode 18, the first Barry Allen team up. Did that make it onto yours?
It didn't. We did talk about it.
We discussed it.
It is a great episode, so that is a solid choice.
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the ones, even before I did any rewatching, I'm like, this has to be on there. It was such a standout. And it's funny. It's one of those things. Obviously, this comes in season 1 when the show was first on CBS and wasn't yet part of the Arrowverse and all of that. So it's one of those things for people who've watched the whole Arrowverse. We've had so many crossovers, and it might seem kind of pedestrian at this point, but I remember what a big deal it was to have this crossover and this cross network guest appearance.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought they did a great job of reflecting where Barry was in his own show without requiring that you had watched any of it. I felt like they made it accessible for any potential new viewers. But just that dynamic, that chemistry between Grant Gustin and Melissa Benoist, and what it opened up in each of their characters to find a kindred spirit in that way. It was just, so many great moments. I mean, when you have our quartet in Kat's office and she says they look like the cast of a CW show, very, very funny. And, this intersects with Kara trying to essentially make James jealous based on advice that Kat has given her. And you see the reaction that James has to Barry. So just so much about it just played great. It was a ton of fun. Like I said, even though I'm not the biggest Livewire fan, we do get Livewire here and Silver Banshee. This is more of a side thing. Historically, I've not been the biggest Silver Banshee fan, but I've come around a lot, and I really quite enjoyed in the New 52 comics, the pairing of Kara, newly arrived on Earth, doesn't even speak English, and Siobhan with her magical abilities actually able to...
They're friends.
They're friends. So
Yeah.
I've really kind of started to come around on Siobhan. This take here was not my favorite, but it's what we had. But just that those two heroes playing off of each other. And especially knowing everything to come in the years ahead with all of those crossovers, but seeing it, revisiting the beginning of it here, just so much fun. I really, really love this one.
Yeah, we talk about Silver Banshee's makeup quite a lot, and so it is fun to see Silver Banshee and Livewire doing their best villain team up to go against Supergirl and the Flash. So I thought that was a good way to approach it. That they had the two heroes and the two villains going up against each other, and I think Kara and Barry's dynamic was maintained throughout the rest of the Arrowverse, that they were always fast friends. And, Kara saying at Barry and Iris's, well, she's saying at their wedding, I guess, in the real one, but there was one where the Crisis on Earth ex-Nazis sort of took over at one point. But that friendship was always such a good one, and I think it is really established here in this crossover. And to your point, back then that was a very big deal for CBS and the CW to allow that to happen. So I actually can't think of another time when that has happened. So that was a major deal at the time to actually put Supergirl into the Arrowverse. So that's a really solid choice.
Yeah, that one was so fun, and the dynamic between Kara and Barry, just so fun to watch, so delightful to watch. They obviously have so much fun being in scenes together. That's the episode where he goes and gets her an ice cream and she's really excited about it. I can remember like little bits of that episode just because of how delightful those two characters are together.
Yeah, and he explains the multiverse. He draws 5 circles on a board, and the multiverse is known. But yeah, that is so much fun. So that's my number 6. Your number 5.
Our number 5 is called Exodus from season 2, episode 15. This is the episode where Cadmus, where Lillian Luthor, who's the head of Cadmus, is sort of, I guess, blackmailing. I don't know if there's a better word to say that. Jeremiah Danvers, who is Alex Danvers' biological father, but also Kara Danvers' adoptive father. He is sort of having to work with Cadmus in order to protect Kara and Alex because Cadmus threatened to go after them. And so Lillian Luthor is trying to get rid of the aliens on Earth. And so she is basically trying to abduct aliens and put them on this big ship that they call a frigate and ship them into space and take them into space. And so this is the episode where they're having to try to stop it. They want to stop this from happening because these people have been kidnapped and put on this ship against their will. And the major moment in this episode, and I think the reason that Morgan and I have such an attachment to it, is it's one of the best episodes for the Danvers sisters, and which was always really kind of, for us, I think, the heart of the show. When I think the show kind of let go of the sister dynamic, it started to flounder a little bit. But this one is where Alex has to go onto the ship to try to stop the ship from taking off. Of course, she can't fly an alien ship. I don't know what she was thinking. But she goes onto the frigate, and in order to stop the frigate from going into space, they have to slow this big ship down. I mean, the special effects, the visual effects are really fantastic. They spent all their money on this episode.
Back when they had a budget.
But Supergirl is the reason they can slow it down. And she has to put everything she has in her as a Kryptonian superhero to stop that ship. And she and Alex have a moment together where Alex is encouraging her to stop it. And it's just one of the best Danvers sisters moments in the series. And I think it's an episode that I think most Supergirl fans would point to as a really good one on the list.
Yeah, that moment where they have one of them has the hand on the glass, the other one has the hand on the glass. That one gets me every time. That one chokes me up because it is such a good episode for the Danvers sisters and their relationship and how much they love each other. And I do, like Rebecca said, I do feel like that was the heart of the show. And as the seasons got later and everyone became a superhero, it sort of diluted that sister bond and that sister relationship. But this episode shows why it's so strong to have these two characters together and have them interacting. And it's also a great Lillian Luthor villain episode. I love me some Lillian Luthor just doing something crazy and evil. And also it was an episode that for us on the podcast, we referenced a lot in a kind of a joking way, because this episode, Alex tells her father Jeremiah she's going to keep looking for him. She's never going to give up on finding him. And then she gives up immediately. She never looks for him ever again.
Yeah, this is Dean Cain's final appearance on the show. And he only sort of comes back into play later when Jeremiah Danvers is killed off screen by Eve Taskmacher later on. So we always wondered, like, where did Jeremiah Danvers go? We don't know.
She's never even trying to find him. She doesn't try at all.
I will also mention, just because I rewatched this one as well to prepare for this, this is also a great Snapper Carr episode. Snapper Carr only came on in season 2, and they kind of brought other things in with season 3. But Snapper Carr, in rewatching this, I'm realizing he was the only real journalist on the show. He was the only.
He was trying.
he was actually somebody who actually had high ethical standards reporters for what they were doing at Catco, and he actually fires Kara at the end of the episode because she, even though she was doing what she thought was the right thing to do and ultimately helped save a lot of people, for Snapper, it was unethical for her to sort of blog on her own and cause a breach of contract with Catco. So Snapper is, telling her to get sources and to go on the record with things and like really holding Kara to a real journalistic standard. And I really missed that later on because sometimes, Kara wouldn't show up to work sometimes. So this was actually
sometimes.
so sometimes, so this was a great example of like Kara going to Catco, trying to do a journalism thing, and somebody actually trying to do it right. And so I thought on rewatch, I was like, oh man, I missed that. That was actually, somebody was taking that seriously in the writing. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Snapper Carr, who never actually snapped once on the show, but he did have a high journalism ethic.
Yeah, I was going to hop in there about Snapper. We talked a little bit before about some of the missed opportunities of the Supergirl show and how sometimes it felt like the Supergirl show is I feel like all of the Arrowverse CW shows had this at various times when they were like embarrassed to be a like a superhero show. You have Snapper Carr, whose backstory we covered on the podcast when he was being introduced, which is truly insane. Like he has a robot hand at one point. He becomes a villain named Starzar. Oh, yeah. He's constantly snapping. It's like the 50s is like, hey, daddy-o. And then they introduce this guy and they can't even let him snap. His name is Snapper Carr. His big thing in the comics is that he's constantly snapping. They did not let that man snap one time. No. We had a snap watch. We were like ready for it to happen. They could have thrown us one bone before he left and let him snap. They never did.
I mean, he was so curmudgeonly, you could imagine him just snapping at the reporters.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. It's funny. I agree. I feel like they could have gone down that road further. And I think having that journalistic oversight, I think that was a valuable component that was otherwise lacking. The only thing is, and I love that actor, Ian Gomez, but I think I've seen him in too many other things, and especially Cougar Town, the Bill Lawrence show, Cougar Town.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm watching him here. I'm like, oh, you're just doing a voice, like you're doing a thing. Like I couldn't really latch on to that character, but the idea of the character, I'm all for. So, okay, great. So Exodus is your number 5. My number 5 is House of L, season 4, episode 16, where we get another tour through past events, but now from the perspective of John Cryer's Lex Luthor. And I think one of the reasons why this is on my list is that, and I've talked about this before, when they announced John Cryer as Lex, I did not have high hopes. I mean, I watched all the seasons of 2.5 Men. Like I had a very specific image of him in my head, and I'm like, I feel like Rebecca's judging me a little bit for watching 2.5 Men. It's okay.
I believe that we referred to him as Ducky Lex Luthor for a really long time, and still to this day, I think I referred to him as Ducky Lex Luthor. So
yeah, no, I think we all had our reservations going into it.
Really, like that guy?
That guy. So I was so pleasantly surprised. Now, is he in my top 3 or even top 5 Lex Luthors of all time? No. But I thought he worked well in this capacity, especially in these few season 4 appearances. I think Law of Diminishing Returns is at play from what I've seen of his return appearances. But here I thought he was used to great effect. And certainly that whole sequence at the end of the preceding episode where he reveals what he's been up to and that he's gotten the serum and he's cured and he has powers and the classical music is playing. It's like that really popped. And then to now have this episode centered around him and seeing all of these events that have unfolded and how he's been pulling these strings with Ben Lockwood and Otis and Mercy and most notably Red Daughter, right? And also on that front, even though, yes, we're in Red Sun territory by way of Supergirl, but I thought overall they did a good job. And I enjoyed Melissa Benoist and her take on the Red Daughter character. And I bought into that dynamic between them. So just to see the lengths that Lex had gone to in putting all of this together and seeing how the various pieces of the season were slotting into place here as he's pitting Kaznia and the United States against each other. I just felt like it was coming together in a satisfying way. And like I said, was just so struck by how surprisingly effective I found this Lex to be. So that earned it its spot here at number 5.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Morgan.
I was going to say it's funny because when we were talking about our list, this also very nearly made our list. We went back and forth on this one a lot, but yeah, I love the those episodes where they go back in time and they show a different version of what you thought you were seeing. I think this one is so effective. I remember watching this in season 4 and my mind being blown and being like, wow, like not only is John Cryer like an incredible Lex Luthor, but this is such a fun story twist that it was Lex behind all of this stuff in season 4 all along. Unfortunately, I think this is what we talked about when Rebecca and I were going over whether or not this one was going to make the list, is that I feel like this episode alone, if you just view it in a vacuum, it's great. But then, unfortunately, we continued on and they try to do the same thing in season 5. And so it does like retroactively taint this episode for me a little bit, that they kept trying to pull the same trick with Lex over and over and over again in season 5 and even a little bit in season 6, where it's like, oh, actually Lex is behind this whole thing and he's got an evil plan. It's like, well, yeah, that's exactly what happened last year. You're not just doing this again, are you?
Gotcha. That's fair.
Yeah, and I think, even though this does pull from Red Sun, I think it honors Red Sun in a way because it does deal with propaganda and how that's utilized to twist things for Red Daughter. Lex uses propaganda to hate Supergirl, and I think that's the episode where she has interactions with little Mikhail.
Yep.
And is that the one where Mikhail dies?
He seemingly dies, but then Otis had a moment of humanity.
Ah, okay. So, because I remember there being a very powerful moment with Red Daughter when she sort of cries over him. So there's something interesting to me about that, and also just the relationship between Red Daughter and Lex, and how he for Red Daughter is sort of her Alex, because there's that very close situation with the name where Alex and Lex are very, very close. And so I think it's kind of interesting that Red Daughter, like Lex for Red Daughter, is sort of that sibling who is trying to teach her things. So I think that's kind of an interesting twist on the Kara Alex dynamic.
Alex. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, that one definitely stood out. All right, that was my number 5. Your number 4.
So our number 4 is Rain from season 3, episode 9. This is the episode where it kind of all sort of goes to this big fight between Supergirl and Rain, who was the major world killer villain for the season. It's taking place around, I think, Christmas Eve.
Yeah,
maybe
I think
it's during Christmas at some point. There's
definitely a Christmas party. Yeah.
There's a Christmas party going on, and there's a major fight between Supergirl and Rain. Just really drag out, dirty fight. And what always sticks out to me when I talk about this episode of Supergirl is that for me, this was like the only time this show caused a literal water cooler moment for me. The next day I went to work and I had a coworker come to me at the water cooler and say, "Oh my gosh, did you see that episode of Supergirl last night?" It had caused such a major sort of thing for people watching that people wanted to talk about it, because Rain beat the crap out of Supergirl. And so it was a concerning thing for Supergirl to go down like she did. So I think this one really stands out as having a lot of stakes to it, and to really put Supergirl in such a situation that she would need to come out of it. So I think this one is very good. And for me personally, I also really enjoyed all of the devil talk. There was a lot of sort of theology, because there's a character in season 3 that we really liked, Thomas Coville. He is very interested in the Kryptonian mythology and the Kryptonian religion and how that kind of plays out. And so there's a lot of Kara talking about Rain as the devil, and Rain says the devil isn't real. You know, a lot of those things I think put a lot of weight to what they're doing and kind of who they're talking about and sort of their actions. And so for me, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think this one's so good because Rain was such a formidable villain for Supergirl. And that fight that they have at the end of this episode was like where I felt like actual concern for Kara, for Supergirl. And that's hard to do on a show, a show where Supergirl is the main character, right? You always kind of know she's going to be okay. But that was one where I was like, oh, she is really down and out. Like it looks like Rain has her number. And I think that the whole, like the world killers, I loved that were really so tied into like Kryptonian mythology. And, you know, as the show got later and older, it sort of moved away from being sometimes even feeling like it was about Supergirl. It sometimes started to feel like it was an ensemble show in which Supergirl showed up sometimes. But this one felt very much like it was her episode, and this was her big villain, and she was really struggling. So I think Rain as a villain was such a compelling one, and also like just character design wise, you know, her outfit and her mask and everything like that, she looked menacing.
All right, you ready for it? Rain is my number one.
Nice.
Pick.
Okay. Look at that.
So I love this episode. I mean, this is one of those ones, not unlike World's Finest, where even before I rewatched a second of the show, this was one that was kind of seared into my brain, because I do remember watching it live and being so struck by how intense and dark and brutal that fight was. Not entirely dissimilar from Flash versus Zoom on that show, but it was so intense, and the audience hears this from me all the time, but the death of Superman was my entry point into all of this at 5 years old. And so, not that it's exactly the same thing here, but we were touching on a similar sort of story and battle. And so I think that kind of pulled something out of me as well. But yeah, I thought the Christmas setting worked great. And there's a piece during that big battle where they crash into an office party and you hear the Christmas music playing as they're thrashing each other. It was so effective. And just Kara going off kind of half cocked, like thinking she can do this, and then ultimately paying the price for it. It was so striking, so surprising. And yeah, this villain, I echo everything that you've been saying. I think Rain was compelling. I think this was another Smallville reference, but I think a better take on what they tried to do with Davis and Doomsday in that show. Mm-hmm. And I think too, watching it now as a parent, where I wasn't the first time around, everything with Sam and Ruby just hits that much harder. And it's funny too, because I've said this so many times, like I generally don't gravitate towards super related stories that veer into the supernatural or the religious side of things. But there are exceptions, and I do find Supergirl as kind of the avenue where I'm more open to it for whatever reason, maybe because it feels like more of a distinct avenue for her. I don't know, but for whatever reason, all of this business about the witches and the ancient Kryptonian religion and the world killers, like all of it really worked for me. So yeah, compelling villain, and yeah, just so brutal, dark, intense. The Christmas setting, all of it really, really, really stood out.
Yeah, this episode, they actually really, I mean, in this season, I guess season 3 actually really tried to establish Kryptonian lore. You know, they talk about a lot of things in this episode about the world killers and their origins, and the mythology with the Ra sun god and all of that kind of stuff. That's embedded within that world killer mythology. And so that's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, they remember the Supergirl show. so they are trying to tell you that. So you, like, to Morgan's point, that doesn't really happen towards the second half of the series. But at one point they were actually trying to develop some their own Kryptonian mythology, and using the stuff that had already been in existence, but also trying to take their own spin on it. Because especially the world killers are very different on the show than they are in the comics. But I think Rain did a good job as an episode trying to sort of dig into that kind of stuff.
Well, it's funny because we just did our episode on the New 52 and Rebirth eras, which I had not read any of that material when I was first watching the show. And so when Rain showed up, all this business about the world killers, I was like, all right. And then I finally gone back and I read those early New 52 comics, and I'm like, oh, son of a gun, the world killers. There we go. But actually, I wanted to ask you real quick, because, you know, one of the things in looking at all of these different tellings of the Supergirl story, you see what's consistent. We see where there are deviations. And it was interesting to me, whereas in the traditional telling, you have Argo surviving that initial destruction of Krypton, and Kara ultimately departs from Argo. Now, if we go all the way back to the very beginning, she's born on Argo, and then in more recent telling, she's born on Krypton and then makes her way to Argo with the rest of them. Here, we do get the survival of Argo, but we kind of circle back around to it in a different way, where she departs from Krypton proper, and then later discovers that Argo is out there with Allura and all these other folks. And I don't know what even my question is, but I'm just curious, any thoughts on that front, just kind of in terms of the wider Supergirl lore and the role that or the effectiveness or lack thereof that it served in kind of playing it out this way?
Oh, that's a really good question, because I mean, now it's even different because there's a new comic series that we started reading, Supergirl Survive, where the take is that Kara and Baby Cow leave together.
Right? Yeah, the Elseworlds. I haven't started yet, but I'm very excited to read that. Yeah,
there's so many different takes on that, but yeah, it's interesting because one of the things I love about the Supergirl mythology in most takes is that she Krypton is destroyed and she remembers all of that. She remembers the culture and her family, and she has friends. On the series, on the TV show, they actually get to reference something that was in the Sterling Gates run, that she had a best friend named Thara. You get to meet Thara on the show. So those are the things I love about that, is that that distinguishes her from Superman. But I guess then I was conflicted, because when Argo was still around, and then Allura is alive, and then later in season 6, Zor-El is alive, and it's like, well, I don't know how I like it for Kara that she has her parents back, but then also that sort of for me kind of takes away from some of that stuff that she makes so much of her character. Yeah, I don't know. The different takes are always very interesting to me. I'm not beholden to any one thing. I do think that the way that they did it on the show was really interesting, because in a lot of Supergirl stories, she is tied to the Phantom Zone. And so to have her get stuck in the Phantom Zone that prevents her to get to Earth, I thought was always a really good choice, because sometimes that can be different as well.
Yeah, right on. All right. So that was your number 4. That was my number 1. My number 4 is Midvale, season 3, episode 6.
That is actually our number 1.
That's actually our number 1.
Very nice. Look, a part of me debated making this even higher, but this, I guess it's probably not a shock, because this feels the most Smallville of all the episodes, but
that's true.
I don't know that I've seen a more uncanny bit of casting than what we got here. It's crazy. You watch these 2 young women, and you feel like you are watching younger versions of the adult characters we've been following, and to just settle in with them. And I think this was a product of needing our main cast to gear up for one of the upcoming crossovers. I believe that was kind of what precipitated,
I think you're right. Yeah.
Doing an episode like this, but to really settle in with the 2 of them as younger sisters early on in this dynamic, where they're trying to figure it out, and there's a lot of resentment on Alex's part towards this new sister she didn't ask for, and she has to look out for her and help her keep her secret and all of that. And then they get caught up in this murder investigation. And it's what's funny, because it's one of those things that I think on paper, I'm sure at the time, if I watched a preview or just read the description online or something, it's like, a flashback episode. I probably rolled my eyes at it, thinking like, it's just a quote unquote filler type episode. But it was so good. And I think the casting and the performances more than anything are what sang about this one. And this is one of those ones, like, if I were just going to pop on a random episode, again, this is pretty high as far as what I would go towards.
Yeah, whenever people ask for like our top episodes of Supergirl, this is always the first one that pops into my head. I think it's so well done. I've been singing the praises this whole time of the casting department for the Supergirl TV show. They obviously probably should have been paid more than what they were paid, because finding these 2 actresses, they look so much like Melissa and Kyler Lee. And the mannerisms, they had the mannerisms down. They acted like them. They talked like them. They looked like them. You could convince me, like, no, this is their like younger selves. Like, we've gone back in time. I think they did such a good job on that. And then just showing, we talked a little bit about how the Kara and Alex relationship is really at the heart of a lot of the TV show and some of the things that we like the best about the show. And I think it doesn't get much better than kind of going back to the origin of them becoming close as sisters. And I think that they just did such a good job with this episode. I like that we flash back and we get to understand both of the characters a lot more. And I think it makes it interesting that they didn't always have this great close sisterly relationship like you would assume that they did. I think in some of the earlier episodes, maybe Alex might mentioned like, that she regretted how she had treated Kara when she was younger, but you really get to see it here that like Alex is like, ugh, my little sister who I'm kind of stuck with, who's like, taking all the attention, sucking all the air out of the room kind of thing. And then they get close to each other and they really bond. And I think this episode is so good and so kind of iconic. They go back to this episode in some ways later in season 6, where they go back in time to around this time in Kara and Alex's lives, and things are a little bit different because of Crisis, of course. But I don't think and those are good episodes. I don't think they can ever really fully capture the magic of this one. I think this is just a really good Supergirl episode. It's about the relationships. It's about the characters, and you really get to learn more about them.
Yeah, this is not only the origin of the Danvers sisters, but it's also, I think in the episode she even references, this is the origin of Kara Danvers. And so Kara's humanity and trying to figure out who she is on Earth is a major part of this episode. And they actually talk, I think this episode is, the casting is obviously very, very, very good. We actually got the privilege to speak to Isabella Vidovich and Olivia Nikkanen on Supergirl Radio. So if you're interested in that, you can find those interviews on our feeds and on our YouTube channel. But not only was the casting very good, I think this episode was written well because it was a lot about home. So they're going back to Midvale, which is where they grew up, and is actually a very Supergirl mythology thing that they put in this episode. Because if you go into the Silver Age, you're gonna, if you read Silver Age Supergirl comics, it takes place in Midvale. Supergirl's in a Midvale orphanage where a lot of shenanigans happen there, and so Midvale is a very major component for Supergirl and her history. And so for them to actually go home to see Eliza Danvers and to kind of feel that home. They reference it several times. Kara says, the young Kara says, "This is never going to be home. I hate it here." And then when they sort of flash to the present, when Kara is taking Alex to Midvale, she says, "Welcome home" at the beginning of the episode. And then at the end of the episode, Kara says to Alex, "I feel at home with you." And so to have that take place in Midvale where they grew up and have it to be so much about home and how the two characters find home with each other, I think is a really well written episode. And it speaks to a lot of the dynamic that I think Morgan and I both love about the Danvers sisters. And I can see why you might like this as a Smallville fan, revisiting it, because Erica Durance is in this episode. They reference Chloe Sullivan. So I think there's a lot of Smallville components to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was a ton of fun. I mean, on the note of Midvale, it's funny, obviously going through a lot of the past stories, we've been talking a lot about Silver Age Superman dumping Kara at the orphanage and all that. And thankfully this Kara is spared that because we have the Danvers family, not Fred and Edna or Fred and Sylvia, but Jeremiah and Eliza. What I did really appreciate early on in season 2, when Kara is really caught up and palling around with Clark and performing their superheroics, where Alex has this moment with her where she's like, "Do you understand that he abandoned you with our family? Does he understand that?" Because it's one of those things that we saw recently in the Sophie Campbell series where Clark gets called out for dumping her at the orphanage. So
someone's finally mad at him about it.
He should be called out for it.
Yes, definitely for the orphanage bit.
Just dropping her in an orphanage casually.
Yeah, I mean, at least here it was, an intact family he knew he had some connection to, but still, and I'm glad that Alex voiced that, because I thought that, to my knowledge, I don't know that ever gets brought up again. You would know better than me. I don't know that it really went anywhere, but I just appreciated that it was voiced.
Yeah, I don't think they really dive into that in the show. But yeah, no, we talk about that at great length because I think a lot of people realize in the comics, Superman sort of hands her over to the orphanage. But what people I don't think fully understand is that he tells her not to get adopted until he says so, until
Yep.
he okays it. So that's the worst crime for Superman. But I think it's good that he knew the Danvers and so he trusted them. And I think the Eliza component here in this episode is really kind of interesting because in Midvale, Eliza usually had like these long sweaters and she was usually like with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or something. And so it's very home, like it makes you feel like you're like warm, wrapped up in a warm blanket. And so I think Kara in some ways is sort of when she goes back to Midvale, she sort of visually sort of takes on that Eliza look where she's got the long sweater with the cup of tea. And so I just enjoy the way that episode is written and the way it was shot and the acting. It's just a really all around great episode.
Awesome. All right. So we already had your number 3, which is Falling, and my number 3, which is It's a Super Life. And we've also already had both of our number 1 picks, Midvale for you, Rain for me. So we just have our number 2 pick. This is our last, our last entry here. So what is your number 2 pick and our last episode to talk about here on your side?
Yeah, so this is for the girl who has everything. This was, I think, our number, for us, number 2. Yeah, so this is season 1, episode 13. And for me, I think I really advocated for this episode because one, it's an early, Kara, Alex, Danvers sisters heavy episode and really establishing a lot of their relationship and why it's so important. And then it also kind of shows us what life on Krypton. It was kind of an early depiction on the show of what life might have been like on Krypton for Kara. But I think for me, what I think is interesting, I know we've talked about how the show sometimes adapted a Superman story for the Supergirl show, but to me, this actually did the version of this kind of story better because for me, the Supergirl version of it makes a lot more sense because she actually knew life on Krypton and she had a reason to miss it. So in the story of For the Man Who Has Everything, that's the original sort of take on this with Superman, he is kind of in this kind of what if if Krypton had not been destroyed and he got to grow up there. But I think it's more effective to actually see Kara go back to there where she, go back to Krypton to where she can miss it. And so for me, that actually worked better in this adaptation. So I think that was really cool. And so getting to see how the show wanted to depict Krypton for me was very exciting. And getting to see Alex sort of in a way, because it's kind of all happening in Kara's mind with the Black Mercy. So Alex is not physically going to Krypton, but she does go to Krypton to try to get Kara out of it because eventually Kara wants to stay there. So I think it was a cool way to see how the show wanted to depict Krypton, but also how they really established that Alex was the person who could get her out of there.
Yeah, once again, we have an episode where Kara and Alex's relationship is really at the center of things. But also I think it's a good episode to really kind of go into Kara's grief about losing her planet and losing her family and everything she's ever known. And we get to see her see Krypton again. We get to see her live with her family and see her family and she knows it's not real. And then she starts to kind of lose sight of that and starts to be like, well, the part of her that wishes it was real starts to take over. And I think it's, the character to me is so different from Superman because of the fact that she can remember Krypton and she can remember this world and this culture. She has a loss that feels more real because she remembers what she's lost. And so I think this episode really brings that home. It's like, all this is kind of built out of the memories that she has of this place that she'll never see again. So I think it's a really good Kara episode.
If I had one more spot, it probably would have been this. Rebecca, to your point, I don't disagree. I think and maybe it's a little different if we're talking a pre-crisis Superman, but still, like in my heart of hearts, I don't know that life on Krypton is truly his heart's desire. Now, when you get to the animated adaptation in Justice League Unlimited, and he's waking up next to a woman who sounds like Lois and has red hair like Lana, I'm like, okay, like now we're getting interesting here. Now it's getting more interesting. But I agree. I do think this is an instance where, yes, we are taking a Superman story, but I think it is arguably even more applicable in the Supergirl case. The reason why it ultimately didn't achieve a spot on the list for me is I would have wanted more of her relishing the life on Krypton. It felt like she was resistant for a good while at the beginning. And it's like, as soon as she just started to kind of fall into it, then you had Alex arrive to snap her out of it. I wanted more of her relishing that life. However, what almost did get at that spot was that rage, and Melissa Benoist played it beautifully when she comes out of it and she's attacking Non.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
About you have any idea what you've taken from me. That last part of that episode was so strong. The fantasy life aspect, I just would have wanted her into it a little bit more. That's kind of the only knock that I have, but it was definitely a standout. And that's actually one of our patrons, Rick. That was his pick for favorite episode as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I especially love the way that they sort of depicted the way she comes out of it. Is that once Alex really has these great speeches where she's telling Kara, you got to come home, kind of thing. And when Kara's fantasy world starts to crumble, there's literal rumbles on Krypton and things start to shake. And so I really like the way that they thought through the process of how are we going to visually depict Kara coming out of it. So I think that it's just an all around great episode.
Right on. Real quick, a couple of other patron picks here. Our pal Brian Dempsey says, my favorite was the pilot. It kind of went downhill from there. Well, I disagree with that, my friend. But,
start on the highest high note and then...
Well, that's like Welling and Rosenbaum on their Smallville Rewatch podcast. It's like for a long time, they would only give their top score to the pilot. It's like, guys, the pilot's amazing, but like there are other episodes. But anyway.
There are other good ones.
But fair enough, Brian. And then our mutual friend, Tyler Patrick, said, two of my favorite podcasters together for an episode, and he cited World's Finest, which he recently watched with his kids. So my number two, and my last episode to talk about here, this feels kind of like a basic pick, but it stood out to me, was the season 2 finale. Nevertheless, She Persisted. And I watched it, and it's like, man, what a ride. I mean, we start out with this slugfest between the silver kryptonite infected Superman and Supergirl. Now, so I love the fact that they make such a point about how she just outright beat him. And even when they float the idea that, oh, maybe it's because he was affected, he's like, no, I was going all out. I'm like, all right, but it's Supergirl show. I can respect that. And it was an epic battle. But all of the business, the duel with Mon-El's mother, this invasion, felt like everyone had a part to play. It was so action packed. But the fact that we end on such a bittersweet note, the sacrifice that Kara has to make to seed the atmosphere with lead to repel all of the Daxamites, even though that means Mon-El has to leave as well. And it's like she wins, she saves the day. Everyone's happy. Most of them are paired off, right? At this point, Alex and Maggie and John and McGonn and all of that. And Supergirl's alone. And you just see the cost of saving the day for her. And it was just such a melancholy, bittersweet note to go out on. And I really did appreciate that conversation between Clark and Kara, where he's like, if it were Lois, I wouldn't have been able to do it. And I agree with that. Like that in terms of how I see my favorite character, it's like, yeah, no, I don't think he would. So kind of drawing those lines between the characters, the fact that Kara was, and I'm not saying it makes Kara a better character, just to be clear, but I appreciated the fact. Well,
I'm just kidding.
We're a little biased.
I know. But yeah, just to kind of, to have her grapple with that and to go out on that kind of a downer note, despite the victory of the day, just really stood out to me. And going back to what you were saying about budget and effects and extras, it's like, my God, like this was packed and the people on the streets, like it just felt very full and alive. And so when we look at the various finales, I know I included the series finale here, but otherwise, like this was the one that really kind of popped to me.
That's such a good choice. And Morgan, if you want to go first, go for it.
I
interrupted.
No, I was just gonna say that I hadn't thought about it, but as soon as you mentioned it, I was like, oh, that's right. That was a good season finale. And I think that season overall, I think had a lot of really good elements to it. You know, we introduce Lena, we have like Monel, we have you know, the Daxamites, and I think Terry Hatcher is such a great villain. She just like walks into every scene and she just chews every piece of scenery she can get. Between her and Lillian Luther, I was like, we are eating well this season for villain. But I think that, yeah, I think that the finale does such a nice job of like really taking everything up to 10 and like really going out on such a high note. And then that obviously that bittersweet ending that Kara has to give up this relationship that she is really invested in, this person she really cares about, to save the city. I think that is really impactful as well. Yeah, I didn't forget about this finale, but like as you started to mention, I was like, oh man, this was a really good finale.
Yeah, this was the the only episode of the show that actually made me cry when I watched it the first time. Not that I was like a big Cara Mon-El fan. Like I could have gone with them or not. Like it wasn't the romantic aspect of it that made me kind of tear up. It was the fact that Cara in that position had to now become her mother, because Allura, when Kara leaves Krypton, Allura gives her the necklace to give to her when she goes into the pod to leave Krypton for Earth. And now here, Kara is trying to she's having to say goodbye to Mon-El. And so she gives Mon-El her mother's necklace as he gets into a pod to leave. And so it just broke me up on behalf of Kara that she was now having to be put in that tough situation, and that she was willing to give something that her mother had given her to send him off. So that I thought that was a really, really, I mean, it's one of the strongest Supergirl moments on the show. So that is a really solid choice.
Yeah, no, beautifully said. And it's going back to the series finale there too, when Mon-El is bidding Kara farewell, and he's like, I don't expect I'll be back in this lifetime. That hit me for whatever reason. I was like, oh man, it's just that finality to it.
I remember at the time I was joking that like it's like the perfect way to like see your ex again is to just be like, it's so good to see you. You look amazing. I don't think I'll ever see you again in this lifetime. So let's just enjoy this moment. It's like Mon-El really was like, and then just kind of walked out of that interaction, probably feeling pretty good about himself.
Listen, this has been a ton of fun. I know this has gone long. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your insight, your passion for the show. I know, look, this is one episode on the series. There's so much more and so many other characters and plot lines that we didn't talk about or we didn't delve deeply. But I feel like through our lists, we were really able to capture, I think, the best of the show. And I think many, if not most, of the salient aspects of it. So this is a lot of fun. I have one last patron question to kind of send us out here. This is from Jan. He says, not to go negative with my question, but why does it feel like this show has already been mostly forgotten? Will it come back around in the culture? Now, Jan always asks this question. I feel like he asked the same question when we talked about Lois and Clark. I guess, do you feel that that's the case? I mean, your perspective might be skewed because you're always talking about it and you're hearing about it from fans. But yeah, I welcome your input. Do you feel that that's the case? And yeah, if so, why do you think that might be?
That's a really good question, because at the time when it ended, we did think about what the legacy of the show might be and how it would be thought of in the future. I think we don't hear about it as much, and lately I think it's just because we've been gifted so much new Supergirl material that we've been covering. But I think for fans of the Arrowverse, I think people will always be talking about it, and I think what's special about it and what I think will continue to be special about it, because I always try to emphasize to people that we may never get another Supergirl TV show. There's another Superman TV show every 10 years. They will put Superman on TV. At least. But this may go down hopefully not. I hope there is another. I hope we get another crack at a Supergirl TV show. But this may go down as like the Supergirl TV show, and the take that they left, I think, also established very important things to her mythology, like Alex Danvers and the Danvers sisters, and even Jeremiah and Eliza. They you talked about Fred and Sylvia. You know, sometimes her parents are her adoptive parents are named different things, but in the current kind of version of the comics, they are still Jeremiah and Eliza, who are connected to the DEO. So in modern comics, those things have changed based on the series and the show's mythology. So I think largely in terms of fans talking about it, it may have died down. But when people think of Supergirl mythology and are creating new Supergirl things, I think they're looking to the TV show to get inspiration. And I think for a lot of people, it's what I love about this show is that it made new Supergirl fans. So where there were no Supergirl fans, there are now Supergirl fans. So I think it'll be looked back fondly as a show that created Supergirl fans and created new things in the mythology.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. I think it has impacted the comics, certainly. I think we kind of can see that in some of Rebirth, and in this new Sophie Campbell run, you know, like you said, the Eliza and Jeremiah, the presence of DEO. You know, obviously Dreamer now is in the comics and she's popping around all over the place and she's having adventures. That's directly from the Supergirl TV show. That's amazing. I you know, in terms of it feeling a little forgotten, yeah, maybe a little bit. I wonder if some of it is the result of like just kind of an overall superhero comic book fatigue that I think culturally we're kind of going through, where it's like we had all of these Arrowverse shows and then they kind of went down one by one by one by one. And so the other thing is, I believe it's still on Netflix, and I feel like it's pretty accessible. You can kind of throw it on anytime. So I think Supergirl as a TV show might not be part of like the cultural conversation. But it might be with the movie coming back out. I think that there's a big chance that there might be a resurgence of the Supergirl TV show, like later this summer, honestly. Like we've been joking on the podcast, it's the summer of Supergirl. Because last year was the summer of Superman. We were like, if they don't brand everything the summer of Supergirl, next year we're going to riot. And thankfully they did. We were like, thanks DC for listening. You know, they take a lot of our special requests.
Sure.
But I can definitely see like a resurgence of Supergirl when people go out of the movie and they were like, I love that character. I love that movie. I need to see more Supergirl. What is available? And the show is going to be very available. And there's so much of it. I can see people binging this. And it's like, you know, this was back when TV, we had filler episodes and we had 22 episodes a season. I'm like such an old person. I complain all the time. I'm like, where's my episode where nothing really happens?
Yep.
I miss those. Everything is like, you know, the plot can't pause for 1 second anymore because you only get like 8 episodes. But this is back in the golden age when we had 22 a year. So people who are looking for more Supergirl content, it's like it's right there. It's on the TV. It's really available. So I wouldn't be surprised if the movie gives the TV show a bump in terms of cultural consciousness and just in terms of like viewers streaming it. And I think to what Rebecca said, we are not guaranteed, unlike Superman, we're not guaranteed we're going to get another show. You know, there was Lois and Clark, there was the original Superman show, then Lois and Clark, then Smallville, then was it Superman and Lois? I was going to say Lois and Clark again.
Well, there's Superman, the animated series, and My Adventures with Superman.
Krypton. You know, there's been so many. This could very well be our only Supergirl TV show. I hope it's not. I hope there's a different take on the character down the line. But I think, you know, for all of its faults and foibles, I don't think that this is if we had only got one TV show, I don't think this is a bad one to get. I think this, you know, for all of how things got wacky as the show went along, a lot of shows have that, especially shows that get into season 5, season 6, and on, especially when they have those longer seasons like we used to have on broadcast TV. Halfway through the season, you're at episode 16, you're like, I don't care. Like, maybe she's bodyguarding the person who's launching the product launch that we're all afraid of this season. I don't know. Throw something in there. They're not all going to be winners. But I do think, going through all of our respective top 10 lists, like, there were enough winners. And I think, if you're introducing a new person to the show, they're going to find a lot of things to like about this TV show. And I think, if this is the only one we get, I'm happy with it. I'm glad we got it.
Yeah, well said. I mean, it would be wonderful if it catches a second wind in streaming, a la Suits or The Office or something like that. And this would be a prime time for it with the movie. I think, to answer Jan's question, I think a lot of it, to whatever extent it has been forgotten or not dominant in the conversation since its ending, I think it probably has more to do with the Arrowverse itself and the way it petered out. I really feel like if you had Crisis and then each show did one wrap-up episode, we would probably look back on the Arrowverse differently. I don't think any show got better coming out of that crossover. And going back to where I started, it's like, I dropped each of them one by one past that point. So I think, unfortunately, it kind of sputtered out at the end. And I think that's what people are left with, and that might have something to do with it. But on a positive note, building off of what you were saying, I mean, this carried the ball for Supergirl, but also for Superman generally. I mean, like, during this period of time when it was airing, yes, there were goings on in the film world, but that was in a huge state of flux. And we've talked about all of that. And so you had this consistent super show for 6 seasons. And there's something to be said for that. And like you said, introduced so many people to the character, made new Supergirl fans, and really carried the ball. I mean, I do another show that's a rewatch of the George Reeves series from the 50s. And there too, it's like, look, it's a mixed bag. And especially you get into the back half, the color seasons, they're rough. But that too, I mean, that was the introduction to Superman for generations of kids, originally and in syndication. And that carried the ball until you get to Christopher Reeve. So there's something to be said for that. So I think this show more than earns its place. And on a personal note, the last thing I'll say is just, I'm so happy and pleasantly surprised and relieved that going back to rewatch as much as I did, I rewatched a good chunk, and having this conversation, I have a much more favorable view now looking back than I did even just a few weeks or months ago. And I'm really happy about that. And so I think, if you look at the best of the show, no, maybe not the Leviathan arc, but if you look at the best of the show, it's really worth watching. And I hope that people will. So I thank you both so much. It was really great meeting you and having you on for this.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having us. We started podcasting about the show, but now that it's ended, we've been talking more about comics and the movie and some Tomorrowverse animated stuff and My Adventures with Superman and all this fun stuff. But we don't really get to talk about the show much anymore. And so this was a lot of fun to come back and revisit some of those things that we podcasted about and talked about and get to see it again as we sort of looked back through our notes about the episode or rewatching the episodes themselves. It's been a lot of fun to revisit them.
Yeah, it was really nice to even before we sat down and had this great conversation with you, when we were sitting and trying to decide what was going to be our top 10 episodes, it was kind of just fun to like throw episodes back and forth. Like, do you want this one? How about the House of L? Should we put that one on? Should we put this one on? And just like kind of revisiting what we liked about certain episodes and thinking like, our top ones, like what represented the best of the show to us, at least, like what were our favorite ones if we're having like a down day and we want to throw on one episode of Supergirl that's not going to infuriate us. Like, which ones are we going to put on? And I had so much fun making this list. I'm so glad that you invited us on to talk about the show.
Oh, my pleasure. So once again, I encourage everyone to check out Supergirl Radio. I'll include the link in the show notes. So thank you both. Thank you, audience. Make sure you come back next week as our Supergirl movie coverage gets underway. We're finally here. And as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Support the show and receive exclusive content by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Rewards include our DCU spinoff podcast, advanced listens, sponsorship opportunities, and more. My sincere thanks to all patrons. please rate and review the podcast via your platform of choice, subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. By popular demand, Digging for Kryptonite merch is available at our TeePublic store. Visit the link in the show notes to get your DFK shirts, hats, mugs, and more. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to Lighting the Bat Signal, a Batman fan journey, which applies the signature Digging for Kryptonite approach to the Dark Knight, as well as another exciting episode in the adventures of Superman, now in its final year covering the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Key art by Isaiah Simmons and theme music by Dan Pritchard.